we can take it as a reset button and what comes after the reset. So we will try to see how to reboot the educational environment. Rejuvenation is the way, and we will see how to take that away. Just a sip of water. Sorry. So what actually struck us on 24th March was not COVID-19, nor was it the lockdown actually. The very fact that there was no hope in sight, hopelessness, despair was what struck us on 24th March. It was like the world has collapsed. The worst hit sector was education, and I say this not because the collapse was any worse, but because of the time of the pandemic, because of the time of the lockdown. It was a time when almost everywhere a session was about to reach its culmination in the annual or the semester examination. A new session was to commence, so admission was another problem. And as if this was nothing, after a prolonged period of total lockdown, while all the other sectors opened partially, education was not allowed to open. So education had only one option left: to change its environment. From being place specific, education was forced to shift base to the virtual world. So teachers started sharing e-content with students. WhatsApp groups became real universities, not those funny universities. We used Zoom, we used Google Meet, we used Google Classrooms. We used all online platforms that were available. But the feel of a real classroom was still far away because neither the students nor the teachers were comfortable in the virtual space because of lack of training, erratic network, poor bandwidth, and most importantly, indifference. So lockdown had pushed us into a VUCA world. I'm not sure if post-lockdown can be termed as post-COVID because the scare has not gone and the pandemic was also very much there. But let us for now focus on the VUCA world. VUCA is an acronym, and it was first used in, say, 1980s, I think 86 or 7. This V stands for volatility. As you can see, U stands for uncertainty, C stands for complexity, and A stands for ambiguity. Now, volatility is turbulence. It is the unexpected. And we can see that in the educational environment, volatility has increased over these 2 or 3 months. Education shifted from being place-specific to being cyber-spaced. You are sharing e-content one day, then conducting classes on Zoom the other day, and then you realize half of your students are still not connected. You don't know how to reach them. Then you can teach, but you don't know how to give examinations online. Not many confusions. Then uncertainty. Given the poor connectivity, low bandwidth, and even power cuts, we saw it just now. The cyber world is not a certain world, at least not as of now. Even the well-established teachers, they were on the verge of becoming obsolete because excellence in teaching changed its definition. It's not your subject knowledge anymore. It is your expertise at handling of the subject in a virtual class that is required more. So a teacher became a techer. So we are teching more than we are teaching. And we are not comfortable doing that. Most of us are not comfortable. Then complexity. Now this virtual educational environment is evolving and it is dynamic. And as soon as you acquire expertise over one set of skills, you realize that you are outdated because it has changed its shape and it demands a different set of skills. Now, the physical university is a combination of the physical and the online. And there is an acute lack of past models because this COVID-19 experience itself is new and unprecedented. And the last one, A, stands for ambiguity. Now, ambiguity in VUCA could be seen as inability to accurately identify threats and opportunities before they become devastating. So environment is constantly shifting here. So it becomes increasingly difficult to understand and to keep pace. We are at a loss to understand as to what is important or what is more important. So whether syllabus is a challenge or the examinations, whether examination is a challenge or results, whether absence of a physical space is a challenge or lack of connectivity in the virtual space, whether academic continuity is a challenge or the learner's sanity. So in this VUCA world, we have to see how well armed we are. We had everything in the pre-COVID world also. We had it all. We had WhatsApp, we had Zoom, we had Google Classroom, we had Google Meet and whatnot. We have it today too, but are we really adequately armed? Now, since it is under the authorities, under the order from the authorities, without taking time, the teachers started posting e-contents. Now, most of these times, these e-contents were in the form of a link or two to some online material already available. These were not teacher-generated material. They were material already present in the cyberspace. And they were not shared with an instruction to read and then meet in the class, the Google class or the Zoom for discussions, because then it would be a flip model, not a problem with that. As I said, these were shared to meet the pressure to share e-content with the students so that they could study from the confines of their homes. Now, many of these students had little or no access to the internet, so they remained as deprived as the lockdown had left them. Now, those who could access the e-content were at a loss to make the most of the material because of the lack of teachers' guidance, because a teacher is indispensable to the educational environment. Now, letters keep coming from the authorities and teachers kept sharing links with the students uselessly. I say uselessly because in terms of output, there was not much. I'm sorry. Now, this is a quote from Rumi, and it's beautiful. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in the grass, the world is too full to talk about. So in times of uncertainty and unknowing and the unexpected, we can always create a space where it becomes easy for us to handle the VUCA world. We have all the knowledge in the world at hand when COVID happened. We had all the supposedly important skills, all the resources at our disposal. However, where was the preparedness? Were we really prepared? Even the world-class universities were totally helpless in the face of a pandemic like the one we are experiencing currently. How many of them had comprehensive plans in place to face and mitigate the risk of the total collapse of the entire educational ecosystem? Now, VUCA or lockdown or COVID, not the lockdown because we have started unlocking, but COVID is here to stay for some time. We all know that, and let us accept that. And we are never going to go back to the pre-corona world. We have come out of a storm, so we are never going to be the same again. The unexpected has occurred, and this is the new norm. So the best way out is to make the most of the reset and welcome the reboot. In this slide, I'm just touching upon the slide. I'm not going into the details because I have actually enlisted things that are already being done. So in terms of technical know-how, in terms of technical platforms, in terms of government aid, much has been done. So I move on to what is missing: the emotional connect. Now, academia is a place not only for the dissemination of knowledge, but also for the emotional connect. We are humans interacting with each other, exchanging views with each other. So academia is a socio-cultural domain where teachers meet, they share their thoughts, not as computers, but as humans. Even now, when there was this disconnect there was this power cut at Dr. Ushma's end. So for a brief period, we exchanged highs. So it was such a big relief. It was so welcome. Otherwise, we interact like computers. Do we interact? We actually don't. So when teachers meet, they must share their thoughts. We are humans. In conferences and seminars, when we used to meet, we made connections. We strengthened the sense of belonging. But in webinars, there are a host of these though, but you come, you present, and you leave. So if there are 5 teachers in a panel, they get to see each other's faces, or they get to hear each other. But no conversation, in the truest sense of the term, no conversation takes place. No interpersonal connection is made possible. It would be better if we start virtualization of academic socialization. Now, when teaching and learning used to take place in a geographical base, the social and the emotional connect that it strengthened and was in turn strengthened by went unnoticed by all these stakeholders. It was like oxygen, it kept nurturing the academic environment, and like oxygen, its absence or presence was noticed only when it ceased to exist. There's been this famous professor of psychology, Antonio Damasio, and I quote from him. He says, the quote now, "We are not thinking machines. We are feeling machines that think." So emotions are the key to learning. Research has shown the importance of the affective domain in teaching and learning. But this is one of the areas long neglected by parents and teachers' fiefdom in the academic domain. When lockdown forced separation of learners from their spatio-social spaces, it brought the spotlight on mental well-being of students. All of a sudden, we started talking about the mental health of the learner. Now, many students actually don't have a safe environment at home. They have found a sanctuary in their classrooms and canteens and common rooms. They don't share their feelings with their parents, but with their classmates and even teachers. I'm sorry for a second's break. Now, emotional well-being of the student has come to be recognized as a major challenge to the educational ecosystem. This is a good sign because we have been a nation where spare the rod and spoil the child was the norm since long. So this nation, if it is fast learning to value the mental health of its future nation builders, it's a healthy sign. The pandemic is also an opportunity, and we are now dwelling on the kind of opportunities that the pandemic or the lockdown has given to us. Because now is the time to sit back, now is the time to introspect. So the pandemic has also given us an opportunity to remind ourselves of the skills students need in this unpredictable world. And Corona has made it very clear that the world is unpredictable. We always thought so, we always said so, but we actually could never understand this. Had we understood it, we would have been prepared. So the kind of skills students need in this unpredictable world, such as informed decision-making, creative problem solving, and above all, adaptability. There is not much that we have in terms of students mentoring in our universities. We have it in schools, but in the universities, we have students' welfare boards, but they are limited only to taking up the scholarship matters or the travel concession forms, things like that. High time that we realized the need of an organized mentoring or counseling for our students. A lot of unrest and indiscipline can be controlled if we understand our students and their problems. So we are now talking about emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence, it is something that we have known, that we have spoken about, we were discussing since a long time. But it never dawned upon us that beyond the curriculum, there is a space where talk is important. And that is why I quoted Rumi, where talk is important. And we have never spared time for that. Have we ever bothered to sit with our students and talk? I'm not talking about individual teachers. There are teachers who are interested in the personal trauma and agony of these students. And there are students who will come to those teachers and share things. But have we ever bothered to done it and in an organized fashion? Not really. Now, digital skills are important. But besides the digital skill, these are the non-digital skills that are important. Motivation, self-esteem, empathy, decision-making, commitment, and interpersonal awareness. Now, in view of the pandemic, I would also say that teachers need to be trained to maintain a threat-free environment in their institutions once we open after lockdown, because we are talking about unlocking. So sooner than later, even the academic institutions will open. For a long time to come, the skills of social distancing or physical distancing, as people prefer to call it now, sanitizing, maintaining a healthy house, these would be really important. These are life skills now. And teachers must not only reskill themselves, but also pass on these skills to the students. And to do all this, teachers would need another important life skill, and this is it, emotional intelligence. So disaster management is a task that shall not be limited to the disaster management departments only. We have understood this at the cost of all that we have lost, that each one of us in the academia will have to be a disaster manager. And emotional intelligence empowers us to manage disasters. The why, the how, the what. Now, conventional education imparts knowledge and fills the learner's mind with facts. But in the face of the pandemic, we've seen the futility of such knowledge. The learners today need to be armed with skills to manage their emotions. Because when emotions go berserk, you lose it. Otherwise, come what may, if you have complete control, you don't lose it. So you need to learn how to resolve conflicts in a peaceful manner. So subject intelligence is fine, but emotional intelligence will rule the roost in the coming times. Now, how to include emotional education in the academic curriculum? Now, besides designing the curricula around the tenets of emotional intelligence, teachers have to be trained and sensitized too. Also, one has to remember, for some time to come, we shall have to be limited to the online mode of teaching. So while there are so many pros of the virtual world, the biggest con happens to be the absence of the personal touch. So emotional intelligence fills this gap. So COVID-19 has, in a way, given us the opportunity to understand the gap, and now emotional intelligence will fill it. When we are on to emotional intelligence, I would like to explain for the students who are attending this. There is this ruler approach, how to go about implementing emotional intelligence in the academia. So ruler again is an acronym, as you can see. The first one is recognize emotions in yourself and others. So the curriculum should be designed keeping in mind the emotional level of the learners. Many a times you will see that in the classroom also there is a text, there is a content in our hands, which if we teach, we end up hurting the learners, unintentionally though. In a physical classroom, when we do this, we know it immediately and we can compensate. But in a virtual classroom, this becomes crucial to learn to recognize emotion beforehand and not to allow that to seep into our content. The second one is understand the causes and consequences of emotions. Now, emotions are the same everywhere, but the worldview is different. Our culture is different. Our context, the context in which we live is different. So many a time the learner is based out of a remote village and we end up using a foreign video, or even the locale is beyond the understanding of the student. And when I'm talking about this, I'm reminded of that popular nursery rhyme, rain, rain, go away, come again another day. Little Johnny wants to play. Now, rain in the Western countries may not be as welcome as it is in India. So when it is raining, our children love to play in the rains. And they will never say, rain, rain, go away. And maybe little Johnny doesn't want to play in the rain, but in an Indian village, little Bhola or Ramu, they would love to play in the rain. So when we are designing the content, when we are designing the text, we need to incorporate this. We need to keep this in mind. Then L stands for label. Label the full emotions using a rich vocabulary. So you have to be able to differentiate between emotions and use the right word. And that is why we have to have a rich vocabulary. Because saying that somebody is annoyed, or saying that somebody is angry, or that somebody is upset, these are three different things. These are three different emotions, which we tend to ignore at times. Now, E stands for express. Express emotions appropriately in different contexts, because emotional outbursts are quite common in teenagers, in young learners, and in the times of disasters, they have become quite common in everybody. We are all choking, we are all as if suffocating. So there may be a learner who was due for her final exam, and she already had a proposal for a job and she was to join that job. And now, because of the postponement of examination, as also because of the economic recession, she lost the opportunity. Her offer has been withdrawn. Now, she should be able to understand what to do. Instead of trying to take suicidal ways or trying to curse oneself or trying to curse the time, she should be able to handle the situation and know that this is not where the world ends. We still have a long way to go. And this happens when our students, our learners are emotionally intelligent. And that again reminds me of this recent Kerala incident. This poor elephant who end up losing its life because of somebody's carelessness, as we say. And we call it carelessness, but just analyze it. Why would somebody stuff a firecracker in a fruit and leave it outside for a stray animal to consume and to meet its end? It's acute lack of emotional intelligence. So regulate emotions effectively to foster healthy relationships and achieve goals. So to foster healthy relationships between parent-children and between teacher and student. So more than 32 crore students in India, their lives have been disrupted by COVID-19. Ever there's been a time for us to focus more on individual and collective growth and less on grades, this time is now. Since academic leadership will be one of the most heavily tested skills through the crisis, and even so a lot of behavioral shift shall be desired. The role of emotional intelligence will be even more important than before. The educational ecosystem has to be redesigned, revived, reshaped, and your emotional intelligence, because every teacher is an academic leader. So our emotional intelligence will guide our team. It will help our students come out of the trauma. So the present data that we have, it shows that emotional education not only improves achievement, but it also increases pro-social behaviors, kindness, sharing, empathy, which is sadly, very sadly, missing from everywhere. And if it is missing from the society, the academia is responsible for it, because we hone our learners, we hone the future generation. So thus, emotional intelligence becomes an amalgamation of social skills, self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and emotional management. It is the most potent weapon for survival in a VUCA world. There are things you cannot change because you do not have control over them. But if you have control over your emotions and approach to things, you'll be able to control your perspectives of things. So it is time to leverage our collective knowledge and resources and to come together as a nation in the interest of creating a set of social, emotional, and educational resources for our students in each state, and perhaps at the national level during this extended leave. Thank you. This is just how to understand that crisis is always an opportunity. Thank you so much. Over to Dr. Ushma.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you very much, madam, for the distinguished, preeminent speech. You have clearly explained the emotional intelligence and involvement of the teachers in emotional intelligence and academia and pedagogy. Now, let me explain, madam. You know that we today in 2020 year, there is a theme of biodiversity in the World Environment Day, and you have taken the same thing, biodiversity. As people are connected and human species are connected, everything is interconnected. In the same way, you are also telling emotional intelligence and teaching and pedagogy, all are interconnected with each other. Teaching, students, biodiversity. The same biodiversity is reflected in your presentation and your paper. It was very finely explained and clearly understood. Thank you, madam. Now, I think Simi Raj madam has arrived. Is she there, ma'am?
Yes, yes, I'm very much
here. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible, madam. And I have to introduce you.
Sure.
So let me talk about madam. She is the assistant professor in IIT Madras. Her research interests include memory studies, historiography studies, Kerala modernity studies, and digital humanities. Her work has appeared in journals, in index journals, and she is currently editing, along with Dr. Robin Andrews, a scholarly collection on Anglo-Indian identity to be published by Palgrave Macmillan by the year. And so over to you, madam. You can start now.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Ushma, for your kind invite and for this opportunity. And I must congratulate the organizers for organizing such a wonderfully themed webinar on the World Environment Day itself. Right. And I also found Dr. Singh's and Dr. Chaube's presentations and their keynote addresses very insightful, particularly when they spoke about the need for heightened empathy at this point of time in terms of understanding what we need, what the others need, and also to sensitize ourselves to the changing needs. And I found it very interesting that Dr. Chaube particularly spoke about our need to reorient the understanding of places and spaces. And this is something that I hope to address as well, the need to reorient our understanding of places and spaces. And I come in with a intent to open up a text for discussion, Arundhati Roy's much acclaimed novel, The God of Small Things. So I hope to enter this text from very tangentially from an eco-critical point of view, and then look at the various ways in which the text challenges our understanding of places and spaces. And I think this is all the more eminent today because we are looking at places as a political category. Now we are looking at the need to relocate and rewire our brain in certain ways to engage with the changing needs and the current demands as well. So having said that, I hope that most of us have a rudimentary understanding of how eco-criticism works. So as I mentioned, I hope to be able to enter this in a very tangential way from an eco-critical approach and look at certain other things as well. So in the eco-critical approaches, when you look at literature, we primarily examine the relationship between literature and the physical environment. It could be anything, as most of you would know, and we also examine the relation between human culture and the physical world, about nature and culture. It's largely about the overlaps of nature and culture, about the constructed categories, about the natural categories, and also about what exactly separates culture from nature, about how these tensions of inclusion and exclusion, they become very important in addressing particular literary texts as well as certain real world contexts that we see around us. So I find this text, The God of Small Things, extremely important in this context. And for one thing, it is a very localized text which was very boldly launched into an international market, and it also received the kind of acclaim that Rushdie's novel Midnight Children had received, and we all know that it's a Booker-winning novel, and it also challenged multiple understandings about the various dialectical hierarchical relations that already exist within our societies. So this text, I believe, can be read as it is a polysemic text. It opens itself to multiple understandings. It opens itself to different kinds of readings as well. So this, I believe, is also a text which helps us to see how blurred the boundaries are between the constructed human worlds and nature. And it also proposes to dismantle these various boundaries which are found in this dialectic pair, in this binary pair of nature and culture. And to make this reading more interesting, to make this reading more complex, I find it that the text also offers a critique of caste, patriarchy, and Marxism. And when the situated, the place, the milieu, the space also becomes a category over here, also becomes a character over here, this critique becomes all the more pungent. And there is an interconnectedness at work in this text, which we would also very shortly examine, whereby the text ends up critiquing the oppressions based on different categories of gender, of race, of class, of caste, of ideology, and of nature. Yeah. So if you think about the setting, the milieu of this text, The God of Small Things, it is set in a place in Kerala, in Aymanam. It is more like a small town, somewhere between a small town and a village. We find that there is a certain kind of rusticness about that place. And place here, just like it does in most literary readings, place also becomes a critical category. When I say place becomes a critical category, I also mean that it becomes a political category as well. So this is how we enter this discourse today, by looking at place as a historically constructed category. And thereby this place also becomes very important in sort of framing the many relationships which are part of this text, which are part of this projected society in the text, the hierarchical relations, the human relations. And we also focus on the material and representational relations which inform these characters and their actions. So this understanding, I believe, is very important when we look at The God of Small Things, and also at many other places which could be, many other spaces which could be a replica of the setting which we find within this text. So this place, it is an actual place. Aymanam in Kerala, it is an actual place. It is a living physical location, and we need to take into consideration the many subjective human experiences as well as the nature-human relations which we would find over here. So here, when we talk about nature, when we talk about environment, we need to have a larger canvas to understand it, as the previous speakers also pointed out. the learning environment has changed. So it is much more than a physical environment. So here when we talk about place as a political category, here when we talk about a place as an evolved political category, which also has a lot of historical underpinnings, a lot of subjective nature human relationships, we need to look at the place. We need to look at this actual place in a more nuanced way. And we also begin to see that there are particular discursive as well as hierarchical relations that any place promotes, and in this case, that is no different either. So if you're familiar with the discussions on imperialism and colonialism, you may recall how Edward Said talks about imperialism itself as an act of geographical violence. So the geographical territory, the actual place, the actual space within which we are all situated, albeit the virtual nature of our interaction now, we realize that this territory, this space is heavily molded, heavily shaped from historical and natural elements. So the point that I'm trying to drive home is that the understanding of place, the understanding of space is very political and very ideological. This also renders a certain complexity to our understanding of the text, also our understanding of this reoriented understanding of spaces and places in the current context. So looking at this text, this is set in Kerala, which is also known as God's own country. So in a certain way, there is a very touristy kind of representation of the text, of the place, of the setting that we would find throughout this discussion. And much has already been spoken about how the Indian writers in English, when they are talking about the nation, when they are putting forward the setting as very localized, it also opens up the milieu, opens up the text for an external Western gaze. So I want you to keep this point in mind as we progress through this discussion about the gaze, which becomes very important over here, about the focalization, which becomes extremely important over here, the place which is being projected, which is being represented through certain kinds of gazes. Yeah? And if you're familiar with the novel, you would know that there are a set of characters who are largely divided into these two major subcategories, caste being an important factor over here. There are touchable characters and there are untouchable characters. And the touchable characters seem to dictate the pace of the plot, and the untouchable characters do not seem to have much of an agency. And there is the play of language that Arundhati Roy uses throughout this work in order to critique not just the received understanding of language, but also the received notions of hierarchy, which operates in forms of gender, in forms of caste, in forms of political ideologies, right? So since our time is also very limited, and I'm assuming that I presume that some of us, most of us will be familiar with this text, with the fundamental premises of the text. So I propose to dive in directly into particular kinds of ways in which characters are placed within this setting. So there is an idyllic setting over here in terms of the natural setting, in terms of the physical setting, the geographical territory which gets described over here. But there is a certain politics inherent in this, which also defines, which also informs our understanding of characters. So if you take if you're familiar with the text, again, I'll very briefly going through it. There are the story is largely told, the plot largely advances through the point of view of these fraternal twins. The two, it is the story of two twins who are also separated, who has had a very difficult childhood, and they are recalling this through, in a very unlinear way, in a very non-linear way. They are recalling this. It's very playful in terms of language. It also challenges and completely disturbs all the conventions which we are used to in terms of storytelling, as well as in terms of the use of language. Yeah, and as you must have also noticed, if you're familiar with the text, that there are a lot of these references to localized, a lot of localized references to which even a glossary is not provided. So that's a kind of boldness, that's a kind of uniqueness of the place, space, setting that the text offers to us as well. So there are, there is the title being God of Small Things. There is an untouchable character named Veluta, who is almost like the protagonist, who also loses his life towards the end because he enters into these unwarranted liaisons with a touchable character, with a touchable woman. So the story is also about one central character, Ammu, who is going through a lot of tribulations, mental as well as the situational tribulations. And it's also about how the entire family finds their way around this, right? So I want you to focus on, I want you to think about the untouchable character, Veluta, and how he is placed in this particular setting, how his significance is accentuated vis-a-vis the setting of this entire work. So if you're familiar with the eco-critical approaches, we understand that when we look at a place, if you look at a space, a real physical setting, the agriculture over there, the labor over there, everything becomes extremely important to our understanding. But at the same time, sorry about that. Right. So if you look at a character like Veluta, we find that his labor, the way in which he engages in physical labor, it is largely aestheticized in this entire discussion. So when you're looking at the relation between literature and the physical environment and how the territorial boundaries are contested over here, and we realize that Veluta, a lower caste character, an untouchable character over here, that's how he's also referred to. He belongs to one of the Paravan, or one of the Pulaya caste. So when his labor is being talked about, he is a carpenter by profession, but there is a way in which everything gets dehumanized. Everything becomes aestheticized over there. And he only becomes someone who is useful, someone who is a gift giver to the other touchable characters. This I find extremely important in the sense of a larger cultural understanding as well. If you're familiar with Bourdieu's ideas of cultural capital, you will know that there is this sheer discourse, this sheer absence of a discourse of labor, this sheer absence of a discourse of how this character contributes in different ways, that becomes very interesting, because all of his contribution, all of Veluta's contributions, is a carpenter. He's making toys for the kids. He is fixing the furniture in the house of this touchable family. All of this becomes a contribution to the cultural capital of the middle class self. And that is how his relationship always gets situated. That is the interesting way in which his relation, his identity always gets situated. He is there merely as a gift giver who cannot cross particular kinds of boundaries. And if at all he crosses, he dares to cross certain kinds of boundaries, as we will see towards the end of the text, he meets with an imminent death. And the way in which he is presented, this character is present, is also very interesting. The text tells us he's not an old world Paravan. He's not like many other untouchable characters, which is also a bit problematic given our understanding of how the hierarchy of caste, how the identity of caste also operates. And the fault that the touchable characters find with him is that there is an unwarranted assurance about him. He is very skilled at his work. He's politically aware. He is very confident. And he's also very rooted in his identity. He's very confident. He's not ashamed about his identity, but he's very rooted in his identity. And he holds his head high while he is interacting with everyone. So now let us look at the problematics in this in terms of a very contrasting understanding of the characters. If you look at the other characters, though they are currently rooted in this village setting in Aymanam in Kerala, we find that their exposure, they've all had, most of them have had Western education, and they all have had an urban exposure, which also informs their response various situations. And at various levels, they seem to have surpassed the nominal understanding of the nominal hierarchical relationships based on gender, based on caste, based on race, ethnicity. There's also a character who had married a foreign woman who also becomes part of the family very briefly. So in spite of all this, we realize that the fundamental grammar of the place, the fundamental hierarchy of the place, which is rooted in caste settings, which is rooted in religious settings, which is rooted in all of these hierarchical understanding, that informs the discourse of the text. This fundamental grammar also informs the ways in which these different characters respond to different situations. And there are multiple ways in which this text challenges the existing boundaries in terms of what is possible, what is not possible. It critiques to the core the patriarchal underpinnings, which is prevalent in almost all kinds of relationships that we would find within the text. The relationship between within the family and how they interact with the others. But at the same time, we also realize that there is something very inherent and innate about the plays that it makes it impossible for the characters to go beyond these boundaries, go beyond these hierarchical relations. The text at best, what it succeeds in doing is in blurring these boundaries. And I think that, it's very important, particularly in this difficult times when we are also trying to negotiate these boundaries, the boundaries between the virtual and the real, the boundaries between the constructed and the natural. And we also realize that as and when the many circumstances change, there is all the more a need to question these boundaries, to challenge our understanding and to push beyond these boundaries in whatever ways are possible. Right, so there is, again, entering from a very tangential point through the anechocritical approach. Yeah, when you talk about nature and culture, there are two ways in which this could be understood. One, nature and culture, nature being which is already there, something very, very organic, and culture as something which is nurtured with a human, with an active human, agency. There we will find that either they can be seen as mutually enriching, one enriching the other, one informing the other, the bearings of one could be found on the other, or nature could be seen as an artifact of cultural construction. So whichever we see it, whether these two binaries as complementing each other or as two binaries which are quite opposed to each other, we find that a character like Veluta, who does not have the cultural capital, who is hierarchically placed really low in this social stratification, he is pretty much at an advantage. To give you a couple of instances, there is a factory in this place where this novel is set, which is obviously run by this the touchable, the upper caste family, which is to which the leading protagonist also belongs. And Veluta, the untouchable character, he is employed over there as a carpenter, and he is a skilled laborer who's much valued. But the way in which he is incorporated into this entire system is also quite problematic, because he is due to his skill, due to his efficiency compared to the other people from his community, he is put in charge of the general maintenance. But we find that the capitalist modernity, which comes in the form of a savior when it comes to this larger system, the factory system is very enabling over here. It gives them the opportunity to come out of all his traditional vocations, traditional occupations. There is a chance to get some kind of an exposure. But this same capitalist modernity also becomes a delimiting factor here when he is not paid the equal amount of wages. So here we find how the place, the hierarchical relations within a place, the discursive formations within a space also becomes extremely important in determining the kind of relations between people. Extremely important in determining even the so-called liberating frameworks that something like capitalist modernity would offer. And this, I believe, is extremely important. If you connect this to the current situation, we find that modernity is something which is enabling these changing ways of education during these difficult times. But as the previous speakers also pointed out, there are certain kinds of limitations where our understanding of a safe environment, our understanding of connectivity, and the physical modern features which it also becomes an understanding of this also becomes extremely important because it is not evenly distributed. So I believe that works like this, fictional works like this, which also are also can function as a slice of the life that we see around us, they help us to open up our minds and also to see how these hierarchies of these hierarchical relations operate within particular kinds of structures, and how the same thing, something like capitalist modernity, could be enabling as well as delimiting in multiple ways, right? So, about a bit more about these, the way in which Veluta becomes so a bit more about the way in which Veluta's interactions with these other characters are dictated. So we find that he is not, his presence is very delimiting through this entire work. And there is one of the first appearances that this character makes is when he is found marching in a political rally. That is where his first appearance is being made in a communist political rally. He is seen as participating in the march. But we understand that that is the most public that he manages to get. His political life is limited to this act of marching with a red flag. And beyond that, he is not able to make any kind of public appearances, even while Veluta, this untouchable character, is being presented as someone who has, who's very different from the others, who has access to these spaces of modernity, who has access to these, who has managed to climb the social ladder, at least in certain ways. We find that his presence, his public presence is very, very delimited. And he's also seen with, whenever he's seen in public, if he is seen as marching along with another political party, he is seen as with a lot of suspicion. And they suspect that he might trigger some union activities. And he also becomes a very convenient and a legitimate target for most of the other characters to either take out their anger or to fix him in particular ways that the order is not disturbed much at all. So one of the things that I find extremely interesting in this work is that though it presumes to, it attempts to challenge these boundaries of caste, boundaries of gender in multiple ways, we find that through and through, in many ways, this untouchable character So we understand that for whatever Veluta does, which is part of his occupation, which is part of his livelihood, like he fishes and because that is one of his major source of food, but his way of fishing is seen as a pastime for the kids. So whatever he does, this is why, I pointed out in the first half about how his labor, the labor of an untouchable character, it becomes at best a romanticized sort of activity. It becomes a pastime for the kids. He makes these cute little toys for the kids, and he also becomes a source of some leisure, source of some comfort for kids when they're feeling lonely. He's going fishing with them, and his the descriptions about his body, his physical self, it also talks about how the untouchable character fails to become anything more than a mere physical presence, which exists exists either for the leisure of the other more privileged characters, or it exists as a foil to show how he could be a convenient and legitimate sort of target in this. Yeah. So there is no organized socialization. There is no organized kind of labor that he is allowed to take, allowed to participate in. He's not even allowed to take any form of pride in whatever kind of identity that he has. So, there is there is something very interesting about this character. This character is not really allowed to change throughout this work. And if if you're interested in a historical understanding of how these discursive sort of spaces and these discursive understandings work, and you must be familiar with the work Untouchable, one of the earliest works in Indian fiction in English, where an untouchable character's life, one day in the life of Baka, is explained very beautifully. We find that if we compare Baka and Veluta from the god of small things, so we understand that they are really not allowed to change. There is a hierarchical relation, where there's a hierarchical system which is in place, which also sort of forces these characters to remain as set in stone. Of course, compared to Baka, Veluta from God of Small Things is a little more liberated, is a little more politically aware, but they both remain at a disadvantage compared to the many other kinds of privileges which are around us. It's very, very important to think about these different aspects and to understand how space becomes a politically constructed category and how it facilitates different sorts of these hierarchical relations. So, I will very quickly wind up as well. I want you to think about this relationship between the human culture and the physical world. When this is today's World Environment Day, and this is also the apt time to think about, to push our boundaries in the ways in which we think about environment in a larger way. So here we find that this novel is, it is, if you've read through this novel, you would know that this is a love story and also a tragedy towards the end, where one of the characters is, he's assaulted to death because he falls in love with someone from the wrong caste. Yeah. So, and there is also a lot of other political underpinnings for this. We realize this, Veluta's tragedy, somehow, his personal tragedies do not really seem to have any value in this entire narrative. There is an instance where the novel very briefly tells us that Veluta had disappeared for about 4 years. And those 4 years, and perhaps in one paragraph, we are informed that he had disappeared for 4 years. No one knows where he left. Some things, maybe he went to the capital city, and some think he was in Trivandrum, and something he perhaps he was part of a Naxalite movement, because that is what people from his community, from his caste, they're supposed to do. If you disappear, we are going to create a riot somewhere. But during this time when he had disappeared, there are a lot of personal tragedies that had befallen him. His mother dies, his brother is paralyzed, and these events are not given the kind of tragic ambience that it deserves in this entire space of the novel. And we find that his mother's death, he's not really given that space within the novel to grieve these sort of tragedies, to experience these sort of tragedies. So tragedy also, the grief also becomes something which only certain communities, certain privileged sections can experience. Tragedy becomes something which is also part of the cultural capital in a very Bourdieuian sense. Tragedy also becomes a cultural, the ownership which comes along with the cultural capital. And no one really knows what happened to Veluta during those 4 years, and how these personal tragedies affected him, and how his political thinking is changing, and the text really does not bother. And at some level, I feel that this is also a deliberate move, a deliberately politically incorrect move from this text to alert us to the ways in which certain kinds of negations, certain kinds of erasures become quite common, become very commonsensical within this current framework, within this our current understandings of place, the ways in which places are discursively constituted, the ways in which spaces are ideologically as well as discursively constituted, right? So many of the things which are seen as a big step for this character, it does not even meet the basic needs of the other privileged characters. And to sum up, I think this, I particularly thought of choosing this work for today's discussion, because this is a text which has a very pertinent description of the place and the space. It also shows how the place and the space become political as well as ideological determinants in deciding how people interact with each other, and how the ideology of caste, the ideology of gender, how patriarchy, all of this becomes easier to work within sort of particular kinds of locations, within particular kinds of discursively formed territories. Yeah, I hope this will also give you some insights to take further into the kind of research, into the kind of future that you would like to do as a students. I hope this would also encourage you to look at, take a further look at, how cultural capital gets framed in particular ways, and how place, and this today, and I think these times are extremely important to think about these sort of problematic categories, things that we took for granted earlier on in terms of a space, in terms of a place, and to think about places and spaces as being historically constituted, and how this change in understanding also helps us to sort of regulate, sort of reorient our understanding, our relationships, as well as the ways in which different categories, different communities, and different people who are located in different discursive spaces also interact with each other in with perhaps a more blurring of boundaries, as this text also enables. Right. So thank you for your time, and thank you for listening. Right. Thank you, Dr. Bhatt, again for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you, madam. Thanks a lot. You have clearly explained the things which are necessary in humanities field. There are many research scholars from all over the nation, from JNU, New Delhi, the students of Jamia Millia Islamia University, and many other scholars and PhD students. They have done registration and they have sent their abstracts regarding eco-criticism and humanities. So they need the clear insight, and you have explained them how to look at the novels and how to study the novels and what are the things that could be studied regarding the environment and eco-criticism, because you explained them culture, environment, and eco-criticism, environment, and humanities, eco-criticism, environment, and region. Most of the parts are taken. Untouchability is also taken, and these are the insights through which the scholars can do the PhD and they can do the research. So this is the best explanation for our humanity people, because we are in the field of humanities and we are working most of the times we are working with novels all over the nation. Novels are our favorite field. You have taken Nobel laureate Arundhati Roy. So thank you very much for your presentation. Thanks for your speech. And I have to tell Asha madam and Smriti madam also that lots of people and the audience is connected with us on Facebook page of our college. So they can see that Facebook page and they can see the audience, and there are many reviews and comments are coming about your lectures and your speeches. So we can have that session and you can go for that on that Facebook page. Now I think the session 1 is over. If madam has arrived, Shweta madam, so that we can continue, otherwise we can go for the short break, a digital break, and we can connect again.
Dr. Ushma, can you hear me? Hello, good morning.
Very good morning, Shweta ma'am. We
So
are
just,
able to...
Yes, I was just listening to the lecture by Dr. Merin Simi Raj. So if you wish, you can take a break. Otherwise, I'm fine. But I would just like to do a demo of my screen sharing before
Yes,
you.
then let's continue. Okay, let us have the demo and then we can have the break. Afterwards, we can continue again.
All right.
First, you share the screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Done, madam. I think you can share the screen.
Yeah,
Yes.
can you see my desktop?
Yes, it is written integrating.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Okay. So we can continue again after 10 minutes, ma'am?
Yeah, okay, fine.
Okay, then. After 10 minutes, we are meeting again.
All right.
All of us.
Can you hear me, Ushma? I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Now you are audible.
Okay. Let me introduce, madam, you to the FB team because people are watching us on FB and YouTube and in other resources. So let me explain you first. Dr. Shweta, madam, has been PhD from JNU, and madam has the assistant professor in IIT Patna in HSS department. Recently, madam has worked with linguistic ecology in Bihar. So we have to listen about that, madam, because ecology, eco-criticism, environment, and environment literature, these are the themes of our symposium. So you are supposed to tell about that also, likely. And linguistics is the main field of madam, so she is going to elaborate us regarding linguistics also and environment also, and as per her topic. Let us listen to ma'am. Over to you, madam.
Thank you. Very good morning to all the participants. And at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Ushma Bhatt for reaching out to me and inviting me. And I'm very excited for today's talk because today being the World Environment Day, and of late for the past couple of years, I have started exploring a new area of research, that is uh, how to document traditional ecological knowledge, because as you know, our country is very rich in ecological knowledge. Our ancestors and forefathers knew a lot of things about our surroundings, the flora and fauna, and how they integrated all that knowledge in our in the lives, so much so that even the metaphors, the idioms that we use, there are times when they have bearing of that knowledge. So for today, I would like to, briefly introduce what is this new area of study and research, that is traditional ecological knowledge, and what are the benefits that one can have by integrating that in the popular mainstream education, and what are some of the challenges that this traditional ecological knowledge system is facing, and how we can overcome those challenges. Now I would like to share my screen. So along with my talk, I would also uh, show you my PPT. All right, Dr. Ushma, can you see my PPT?
Yes, of course, ma'am. Traditional ecological knowledge.
Yeah, so the topic for today's discussion is how to integrate traditional ecological knowledge into mainstream education, and some of the perspectives that need to be addressed and understood in relation to this topic. So how, let us first develop an insight into this particular, now this stream is becoming very, very popular, that is traditional ecological knowledge. So I would like to draw attention of my audience on this collage that I have prepared. There's an interesting, in 2004, suddenly there was an interesting piece of news. That was the time when Indonesia and India and most of Southeast Asia was very badly hit with tsunami. And interestingly, the newspapers reported that the indigenous tribes of Andaman and Nicobar Islands somehow escaped the massive damage that took toll on urban population on the coast, on Indian coast and Andaman and Nicobar Island coast. Uh, it so happened that in the languages of Great Andamanis, they have a folklore called smong. And according to the folklore goes by that if the earth shakes very heavily, it is followed by a wall of water. So these Andamanis people knew about their folklore. So when they felt that the earth was shaking very badly, they knew that it would be followed by a huge wall of water. So before the tsunami waves could hit the coast, they, with their belongings and with their families, they ascended to the top of the mountains that they had access to, and not a single Andamanese was hurt in tsunami. So something which is so prevalent, like folklores. All of us have folklores in our own languages, but there are times when we do not pay attention to the details that have been handed over to us through our folklores. This was just an instance, and then suddenly there was a lot of talk about the importance and the significance of folklores across the globe. So this is the layout of my plenary talk today. First, I would like to discuss about what is traditional ecological knowledge, how is traditional ecological knowledge positioned in the current system of thought and education. What are the dimensions of tech? What are some of the perspectives that we need to understand with respect to knowledge system, with respect to climate change, governance value, cultural sustainability, what will be the contribution of tech in modern education system and some of its challenges, and finally we'll conclude the talk with some of the takeaway points. A part of indigenous paradigm is called native science. So this is um, another synonym that goes with traditional ecological knowledge. It is called native science. This native science talks about the in-depth and elaborate relationship to between ourself, to the land where we stay, to the community in which we live in, the plants, the animals, the entire cosmos that is around us, and the spirit and the creative forces of life. So as you know, most of the tribal religions, they believe in the faith of spirit. They feel that each living organism around us has what is called a life force or a spirit, so much so that even the mountains and the lakes and the ponds and the rivers, even the inanimate, also have what is called spirit, which is kind of life force, which has a great impact on the lives of people that live in that particular community. Traditional ecological knowledge goes by multiple names. When you read research papers on this topic, do not be confused by the multiple names that are used for this particular branch of study. So it is also known as indigenous knowledge system, indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge of environment, traditional ecological knowledge, and native science. They are all the same. If we look carefully at this particular diagram, we can see how traditional ecological knowledge is positioned with respect to other disciplines and other dimensions around us. So you see that first at the center is traditional management practices. So we have a traditional ecological knowledge system. This traditional ecological knowledge system, or tech as we say in short form, the acronym. So this tech kinds of guides us or directs us or gives direction or lays out the do's and don'ts of how these traditional practices can be managed for the benefit of society, primarily in two ways. First is how we can conserve the biodiversity around us uh, with the knowledge of with the traditional knowledge of ecology, and then how the ecosystem can be served with the help of this biodiversity conservation. So you see that this is a cyclic process. Like first you have the traditional management practices. With this kind of information, you undertake biodiversity conservation practices, and then you serve the ecosystem. So in serving the ecosystem, you are serving the humanity, you are serving the life in general, and creating a very just and sustainable environment to live in. These are some of the dimensions that we must understand when we are addressing uh, tech systems. So first is factual observations. Now, interestingly, when we start documenting traditional ecological practices, in any of the researches that have happened and that are happening right now, the first is you need to observe the facts. So what are the kind of behavioral patterns that you see around your community, around your flora and fauna? So first is factual observation. So if you have a folklore, how do you observe the knowledge system shared in the folklore in the community that you live in? So you have to actually observe the folklore. Then next is management system. So after you make your factual observations, how are those systems managed in the community? So what is the kind of interrelationship that you see between the different stakeholders of the community? Then third is past and current uses. So so it so happens that when a folklore is handed down through generations, uh, there could be possible changes in the way one saw uh, that folklore 100 years earlier and now. So there ought to be certain changes because of cultural shift and changes in the society. So do you see there any relevant changes or not, or the information can be used uh, at face value even after the passage of 100 or so years, or maybe 500 years down the line? Then ethics and values. Then uh, it so happens that traditional ecological knowledge is ethically very rich, because uh, because each participant of community or ecology has a certain role and importance in the folklore. So there is something for even the plant, there is something for even the animals. And the folklore, the knowledge shared in the folklore, the knowledge which has been passed down through traditional ecology, never attempts to benefit one at the cost of another. So this is where modern societal values differ from traditional values. Then the fifth is culture and identity. Again, culture and identity plays a very important role in tech, because cultural norms and values and traditional ecological norms and values are very much integrated to one another. They are very much assimilated with one another. You cannot take out one and uh, you would expect the other to be sustained in society. It does not happen so. And wherever you have culture, you also have identity. That is why all the tribal people, the Native Americans, the Aborigines, they have so much cultural affinity to their value system, to their traditional practices, that it has become a part of their identity. You just cannot take them out, and you can still have a tribe. You just cannot have them. And the final one is cosmology. So all these five together form the cosmos. So all the five dimensions together interface with each other in order to create a cosmos where everybody is happy and everybody has something beneficial to get from the other. These are now let us proceed to discussing some of the perspectives of tech with respect to prevailing values and norm systems in our society, and let us look at how tech can influence the prevailing norm and value systems. So interestingly, the whole area of tech research started with Paul Fairbairn in 1987. He was an environmental scientist, and he defined uh, tech in a way that the abstractions that are prevalent in the traditional ecological knowledge system, the abstractions somehow help to concretize the scientific theories and hypotheses. So see, Paul Fairbairn actually tried to develop a a continuum between traditional ecological knowledge system and the modern scientific knowledge system. According to him, what is abstract for traditional ecological system is actually witnessed as concrete in modern scientific knowledge system. They are just two faces of the same coin. Let us now look at how knowledge is viewed in traditional ecological system. As we all know, knowledge is key to progress in development in any kind of society. Knowledge is required for community planning, and for community planning, there is an absolute requirement for reliable and trustworthy knowledge which can pave way for future development. And needless to say, tech provides knowledge of different types of flora and fauna which can be constructively used for the development of a community. The next is climate change. So as we all know, for the past 50 or so years, there has been a huge talk about climate change and how the global temperature is rising, leading to melting of snow caps, and there have been uh, so many studies about what are some of the imminent geographical disasters that would ensue because of the climate change. Now, interestingly, tech provides a baseline for climate information, climate history, and also in identifying local climatic changes. So, if the modern education, modern scientific system actually pays heed to traditional knowledge system, then climatic changes at local levels can definitely be documented in a very, very accurate manner, and then a global pattern can be created out of these local observations. And once you have a global pattern, according to tech, necessary environmental friendly and sustainable measures can be adopted to take care of sudden climatic changes. Some of the observations that happen at the level of tech are traditional people are very much expert in identifying the changes in the levels of water bodies like lakes and ponds, shifts in the location of tree species in forests, migration of birds, and change in the blooming time of flowers. So all these things together uh, uh, create a very robust knowledge system that has not failed our ancestors for centuries and centuries altogether. So if there is an observation that suddenly a plant species has changed time of blooming, or an animal species has altogether vanished, and there are sudden rise in the temperature of the ground, and there is sudden change in the level of water in an adjacent lake, these all indicate sudden some kind of underlying change in the temperature and the atmosphere of the place. And all these things are actually carefully monitored by the traditional people, and they adapt their lifestyle according to these changes without creating any hindrance for the natural phenomena. The next in line is governance value. So how does tech can play its bit in creating a value system for efficient governance? The first one is collective conscience. So needless to say, uh, the community which strongly believes in traditional practices, they have a very collective consciousness, they have a very collective self-determination. Their belongingness in the community and society is so strong that they do not succumb to modern practices just like that. They have so much belief in their own traditional practices that governance in such communities becomes very easy if the governing body also has equal respect for the traditional value systems. Tech also provides cultural, social, economic, and political relations needed for its members to pursue good life. So, tech is not just a relationship with animals and plants in the community, but it also talks about social relationships. The how should economy, should how should economy play its bit in creating a just community? What should be the political system that actually talks about the goodness of the people, talks about the development of the society? The next one is cultural sustainability. Tech is very important for the sustainability of cultural practices. So even in our household also, if we have our grandmothers or grandfathers, we'll know that there are times when they depend on folklore, and they would be stating many such things throughout the day regarding the eating habits, regarding what is the time when we should take bath, when we should what is the time when we should go to bed. These are the small lifestyle habits that comes naturally to them when they are talking to us, and this is part of traditional knowledge system that has been handed out to them through generations. Even so much so that what are the kind of vegetables and fruits that should be eaten during what time of the day, what are the vegetables that should be eaten in winter, in summer. In Bihar, there is a very popular practice that fish should not be consumed during the month of July and August. They say that in during Sawan, the month of Shravan, when you have monsoon break in Bihar and adjacent areas, it says that you should not consume fish. And what could be the possible line of thought behind this folklore? Simple, that when there is a lot of rainfall, there is also flood situation, and whenever there is flood, there is also contamination of water bodies, and whenever there is contamination of water bodies, that is also, it is inevitable that the that fish is left out of contamination. So instead of propagating the entire line of thought, the entire knowledge system has been put in just one small phrase, that please do not consume fish in the month of during the month of monsoon. Tech is often highly developed relating to traditional indigenous areas and can span hundreds of years back through multiple generations, something that I have been talking about right now. Then let us look at how tech, where does tech stand in modern education system? Interestingly, since tech research is, according to modern techniques of research, is relatively new. And since it is interdisciplinary, so it is very slow to be accepted and integrated into Western science. So there are many participants in tech. So you have something from biomedical, you have something from environmentalists, you have something from ecologists. So since there are so many takers in this, it does not find ready acceptance in any of the established branches of scientific knowledge system. So because of this crisis, it is very important that more and more researches are conducted in this area of traditional ecological knowledge so that it is not lost. The researchers and communities should be proactively engaged in mutual knowledge exchange, so that the traditional communities as well as the scientific communities, they both understand and trust the beliefs and practices going on in their respective societies, so that both together can flourish and come up with a system where the entire society can be benefited as a whole. then tech also needs to be documented. There are the knowledge system is so vast uh, that many folklores have already been lost. So it is very important that any kind of research should commence with documenting this traditional ecological knowledge. And once it has been documented, it needs to be incorporated in the modern education system by promoting collaboration. Collaboration between the government bodies, collaboration between the educational institutions, and their introduction in multiple kinds of educational programs. So here I'm very happy that today I'm delivering a lecture on how this knowledge system can be incorporated in modern education system. And I'm sure that many of my audience would realize that the folklores which their old relatives at times, speak at home is not baseless. If studied and carefully documented, they can be scientifically verified. I would like to conclude my talk by making a few points here, that tech is often discounted as irrelevant as an ideological system. Why? Because it does not adhere to the paradigms of Western scientific practices. Observations, sustainable practices, active participation in resource use and management, they rely on information databases and can be extended to hundreds of years. So tech already has an extensive knowledge system that has been vetted by years and years of practices. So at this stage, one just needs to start looking at this new area, start somewhere where the folklore knowledge system gets documented and where there is dissemination of this kind of knowledge system. And let us not make the mistake of comparing tech to Western science, but rather treat it as a supplement with rich history and culture. So let us not assume that traditional ecological knowledge system is, is in face to face with modern science. No, it's not like that. They are two extremes. They must be treated as the supplement of one another, where one enriches the other. And ultimately, tech brings researchers and government agencies back to their roots, reminding the Western world how ecosystems were managed in the absence of technology. And we all know that in the current pandemic situation, despite so much of technological advancement, all of us are confined to our household. And if you see the guidelines by Ayush and Ministry of Health, you see we have got so many guidelines to boost our immunity. And again, we go back to our own traditional ecological knowledge system, which talks about what should be eaten and what should not be eaten, by eating what kind of fruits and plants and dishes we can increase our immunity, what should be our lifestyle. We have a lot of news going on around how yoga should be practiced at home, how we should exercise. All these things are nothing but an attempt to take us back to the roots, where we humans used to live as one with the community, with the society, with the surrounding. With these words, I would like to end my discussion here, and I would request Dr. Ushma Bhatt that in case if any of the audience has any queries at suitable portal and forums, they can be either emailed to me or message to me. I would really love to address the queries and answer the questions. Over to you, Dr. Ushma, now.
Thank you very much, madam. You have given the ingenious speech regarding traditional ecological knowledge. And I think that there are many, it is completely unearthed area. So there should be many researches done on TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, with a view to literary texts. People can do the research. There are many researchers, they are doing the research on ecology and eco-criticism, but traditional ecological knowledge is completely unearthed in the regions, in our regions basically. So they can have the chance to do the research on this particular topic. And there are many ideas you have given, cultural sustainability and You gave the example of current pandemic also, that we were stick to drink kada, neem and pranayam and all these things we have to follow because of this TEK only. It becomes helpful. Though we are technocrats and we are using technology, but tech has taken his place. Tech has taken away in that way, I am telling. Thank you, madam. So if sir is there, then we can continue the session with Dr. Rajneesh Gupta. Otherwise, we can have the next session also. Dr. Lopamudra Maitra Bajpai madam has also been in the session, I think. Madam, are you there? Hello? Anybody? Yes, Dr. Lopamudra madam and Dr. Rajneesh Gupta sir both are here. Welcome, sir. Welcome, madam. Am I audible? Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and I can't hear sir. Now, sir is there for the session. If sir is ready, then we can continue with the session. I have posted you on the mail.
Hello.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible to you?
Yes, we can listen you, sir. You are audible.
Okay. I'm sorry. I had to go for some time. Anyway.
Okay. Let me introduce you, sir, for our FB audience and other audiences on online. Dr. Rajneesh Gupta sir is working as an assistant professor in Central University, Gandhinagar in the Diaspora Center. Sir has been the PhD from JNU, New Delhi, and he has done many researches, and he has co-authored book Bharat or Dakshin Ashrut Kshetrad. He has contributed 4 articles in peer-reviewed journals and 9 chapters in edited volumes, along with several other publications. He has participated in numerous international and national level conferences in India and abroad. And he has done hundreds of researches also, and he is always there to help me and support me. Over to you, sir. Now you can continue. Over to you, sir. Now you can continue your session. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes. Now can I start?
Yes, you can start now.
Okay. Well, I'll begin with congratulating Dr. Ushma Bhatt and her team for this pioneer initiative on this auspicious day of World Environment. Well, oh, my voice is repeating.
No. We are able to listen you.
But
Yes, we are able to listen. It's okay over here. There isn't any repetition. It's clear.
clear to you?
Yes, clear to us, sir.
Okay. Okay. Without wasting time now, I'll start my presentation. Well, in my presentation, I will focus on the global governance perspectives on the environment. And broadly speaking, my presentation is divided into 5 sub themes. Well, I'll introduce topic with the Indian wisdom on the environmental issues. Then the second part of the presentation would be on the recognition of the environmental issues as a part of the global governance. Then goes on the major conventions related to the environment at global level. Then Indian approach to the these conventions, and finally I'll conclude the topic. Well, if we begin with the Indian wisdom on the environmental issues, the whatever environment, the concerns are shown by the global bodies in the postmodern world. In fact, we can see all those intellectual inputs from in the ancient Indian literature. Our wisdom on the environmental issues can be seen from the very Vedic word, the Vasudeva Kutumbakam, when the entire earth is considered one family. And when it's considered one family, then all the components of the earth, whether it's living, non-living, whether it's trees, whether it's herbs, whether it's animals, or non-living bodies like water bodies, mountains, everything is considered a part of the family. So like we protect everybody in the family, regardless of their uh, their utility, their contribution to the family. We love to each other and we try to protect them. So the entire Indian wisdom is based on that. We worship, in fact, if we see the from socio-religious perspective, we worship the trees, we worship the rivers, we worship the ocean. So the entire thing basically reflects our approach to the environment, how we consider the importance of the environment for our life, our life as well as the life in the entire planet. However, in the Western world, because of in fact, it was not that the problem of the environment was not in the past. It was in the past also, but it was seen as a local problem only. Sometimes river get polluted because we were not that much globalized, that much technologically advanced in the past. So these problems were of the local types, and those were dealt locally. But the problem begins with the Industrial Revolution in the Europe, 16th, 17th century, when the primary importance was given to the industrial development, to the consumption, when the resources of the nature became the very secondary tertiary things. The prime objective was how to get benefited from the industrial revolution, from the by step pointing the various industries. And we started damaging environment that by that time like never before. In fact, Malthus warned in that period itself about the degradation in the environment, but it was not heard. In fact, in the West, the first ever major concern to the environmental issues was begin with the when a book called Silent Spring was published in 1972. Then only the global concern start alarming the situation. And there would, after we see many international conventions and efforts to deal with the issues of the environment. Whatever issues today we see related to environment are, first of all, the in the 70s we saw the issues of the decreasing biodiversity. The fast becoming instinct various wildlife, the report of IUCN, and then the depiction in the ozone layer became a prime concern. Then hazardous waste in the rivers and even in the ocean. Now there is a call earlier. There was issue, the major concern was the global warming, but gradually we have realized it's not only global warming, but at the same time the global cooling is also taking place. You see, on the one hand, there is a concern of rising the sea level because of the glaciers are melting. At the same time, we have also seen the snowfall in the countries in the West Asia, which were once a desert, were known for the hot temperature. So it's not only the global warming, but also the global cooling. So in fact, the term was given, it's a climate change. It's not about the warming or cooling. It's all about the climate change. As far as the international conventions are concerned, the first major concern, major international event related to this was the Stockholm Conference. It was in 1972, followed by the Ramsar Convention, which was basically to protect the wetlands. Then we had the Brundtland Commission, which first time reached in the definition in a common concern, the definition of the development. It's called the sustainable development. And it was the Montreal Protocol, and of course that related to the ozone depletion. And then we can basically we can identify one major conference is related to this, the Earth Summit 1992, the Rio de Janeiro Summit. And it in this summit we reached in the various international treaties and conventions. The most noted, notably, the Agenda 21 and United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and the Convention of the Biodiversity. Then there was a Kyoto Protocol, which was basically to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, mainly chlorofluorocarbon. Then there was a World Commission on Sustainable Development in 2002 in the Durban. Now, I'm not going to into the detail of all these conventions, but there was one major issues of contention among developed countries and developing countries in all these major global talks. On the one hand, developed countries like US and European countries were trying to shift all the environmental concerns to the developing countries. What in the name of protecting environment, in the name of protecting the world from damaging the environment, they were trying to put all these things on the developing countries, all the responsibilities. On the other hand, developing countries, in fact, developing countries were of the concern that in the way of development in last 400 and 500 to 500 years, the developed countries, to the countries which are so-called developed countries today, they have damaged the environment most. They are damaging the environment since last 500 years. We have started our development process in the last 50 or 60 years or so. Most of the time, even if there was any development in the third world countries, it was induced by the then colonial powers, all the European countries of the today. If let's let's understand this with one very simple example. If any water body was built, if any railway was built in the Africa or Asia in the past, it was not by the because of any need of the developing countries. It was only to protect the interest of the then colonial power. The entire railway system of Asia, more precisely of India, was built to protect the interest of the colonial government. It was not to facilitate the Indian population. In fact, the entire Africa was divided on the paper without considering any socio-cultural, geographical or environmental boundaries. It was by the colonial powers on a piece of paper in 1884-85, the Berlin Conference. All the European powers, the colonial powers, sat together and divided Africa in a piece of paper, which has damaged environment at most, and now today, all the problems are basically an outcome of that colonial division. So our concern, of course, India took a leadership on all these global conventions, all global negotiations, but it was not only India, but it was the concern of the entire third world. That our concern was, since these powers have damaged the environment more, they should take more responsibility. They should be more responsible for protection of the environment. And our country, the countries of the third world, should be allowed, should be relaxed on the certain points on the environmental issues. Of course, this approach, our Indian argument, was first accepted in 1992 in the Earth Summit, when the idea of the common but differentiated responsibilities was accepted in the global convention. That means every country is concerned with the environmental issues. Every country has its own responsibilities, but responsibilities cannot be fixed equally. If the developed countries are damaging more environment, they should take care more. Even today, forget last 500 years, what they did. Even today, if we take only the example of the emission of the chlorofluorocarbon gases, all the greenhouse gases, the US alone is responsible almost 1/4. And the entire third world is hardly 10%. The big countries like India and China, they are contributing less than 5%. So how can these countries be equally responsible for environmental problems like the developed countries? So this was the Indian approach, and and by the time this approach was accepted, all the developed countries are started defying all the conventions. Let's say no convention after 92, after Agenda 21 is accepted by the developed countries itself. The the most famous Kyoto Protocol, US Parliament did not approve, did not rectify that protocol. So, our point is, if there is an environment, and we all are suffering equally by the environmental problems, but the developed countries should should be considered more responsible, and they should behave more responsibly in tackling the environmental these problems. Well, for us, the countries like India, or it's not only India, but all the countries of the Asia and Africa, our developmental needs are of the most prime priority. And in that way, it's not that we don't want to protect environment, we are not bothered about the environmental issues, but for these countries, for us, the other issues like the livelihood of the poor people, issues of the employment, issues of the economic growth sometimes becomes more important than of the environment. We have to look into this aspect also. So all the developed countries need to give us more affordable technology, more economic help in tackling the environmental issues. How much time I have now? Can I get another 6 minutes?
Yes, sir. Of course.
Okay.
Time is
So
up.
now, coming another issues like the issues like the carbon trading, which was permitted under the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework on the Climate Change. Like if we are less emitting carbon, we can get money out of the developed countries. I mean, it's a sort of the business of the pollution. Like if we are able to curb a pollution, and the companies of the developed countries which are not able to curb the pollution, they can pay us money for that, and in the global targets, that particular reduction in the would be taken by the development. It's a kind of the trading of the pollution, the business of the pollution. I think this approach will not work at all if we are serious in the tackling the issues of the environment. Coming to the current issue problem, let's see. Let's discuss about the current situation. Of course, the COVID-19, it's a global pandemic. It has created lots of problems, lots of fear in the human civilization, but it's also, it is giving a lesson to the human civilization. Have you realized in last 2 months, because 3 months, 4 months, because of the crisis of the COVID, the entire world is in the lockdown. Most of the industries which is polluting the environment, damaging the environment, are not functional. And you see the another side, another impact of this, the ozone layer depletion, which was there was an ozone almost hole in the Antarctica. that has winded up automatically. That has gone. Ozone layer has covered again. The we see the clean environment everywhere. That means we have to think about the current approach of our economic growth or development. We have to look into again. And here, I think here comes father of nation Mahatma Gandhi. What approach, what he preached us even at the time of the independent around 100 years back to the nature. Uh, it's not. I don't think it's true that there is no way alternate way of development. I think whatever he has said, uh, that we have to go back to the nature if we want to survive. I think that is the only way we can. By that way, we can protect our environment more. And of course, I will end with this word that though COVID has posed many challenges, but it has also given us a lesson that go back to the nature. And definitely all the problems which we are tackling related to environment will be resolved automatically. With this word, I would end my lecture, and I'd love to answer some queries and questions if there are any.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Very insightful and clear presentation. You have shown that biotic and abiotic, both the entities are very much necessary for human existence. In fact, biodiversity explains us the same thing. And this is the main theme of 2020 year also. And naturally, you talked about the villages and mountains and jungles and forests and rivers. They are very much necessary. And without their existence, we can't be anymore. So industrialization, environment, and biotic and abiotic entities, they can be unearthed after listening to your speech. Every researcher and many people who have sent me the abstracts regarding industrialization and environment, some of the very important and very interesting abstracts I have got, they can be getting the information from your speech. So thank you very much, sir. Now, if Lopamudra madam has arrived in the session, then we can contact her and we can request her to continue the session. Madam, are you there?
Yes, yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are audible.
Oh, yes. Yeah, but you can see me also, right?
Yes.
No
yes.
problem with the video also? Hello? Hello? Hello, ma'am? Hello? Ma'am, it has become still suddenly. Hello? Hello? Yes, can you hear me, ma'am? Yeah, now you are back. Can you hear me, madam? And see
Yes.
me also?
Yes, I can see
Okay.
and hear
Yes.
you.
Yes,
And I
yes.
have
Okay.
to tell my audience that Madam has been a visual anthropologist, author, and international columnist. She's also former assistant professor at Symbiosis University in Pune. She has been a culture specialist. She's attached and affiliated with SARC Cultural Center at Sri Lanka. And she has been working and doing researches, and we have met very finely on that very day of in Gandhinagar in that Central University Diaspora's conference. Thanks to Rajneesh Gupta sir also. He is the main person who had done
Thanks
everything.
to you also, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
So let us come to the point. Madam, over to you. You can continue your
Yes.
presentation.
First of all, thank you, ma'am. And very nice to meet you again. And sir, if you can see me, nice to see you again. Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. And all my fellow panelists, I hope some of them can catch it up if they are here or maybe later on. And it's a very vital day today, especially considering the time that we are going through and the reflections. I would like to pick up exactly from where sir left the note right now. about the concept of development and what we are facing now, and how we are suffering, and a very important time to think where we are heading. What are we leaving for the future generations, and which will be impacting not only one small section of the earth, but the entire earth as a whole. And picking up on that note, I will be covering again, referring to Sir's some points about the colonial times and how it actually started a very significant aspect of destruction. I would like to refer it again in part of my presentation. I would like to now pick it up and go to the screen sharing mode, ma'am. So just one second, please.
Wants to share the screen.
And how it actually started. Yes. Can you see the PowerPoint now?
Lopamudra, madam. Yes, I can see the screen. It is there, madam.
Yes. Okay.
Narratives or water bodies or something.
Yes. So this is my PowerPoint presentation. I would be focusing right now on some part of my research that I have been doing on part of the bigger platform of South Asia.
Yes, I can see the screen.
For the last 4-5 years, since my deputation at the SARC Cultural Center in Sri Lanka on part of MEA, Government of India. And it gave me a very excellent opportunity to look into the research aspect, because I was a culture specialist of the research division of all the 8 countries and across the Indian Ocean, spanning their culture, their identity, their society, and some research that I have started. This small presentation forms a small part of it, which I am going to put up right now. Now, today, as an anthropologist, I tend to look often into intangible cultural heritage, especially speaking about oral traditions and folklore. Not only about India, but on a bigger platform, the entire region of South as well as Southeast Asia. Now, I would be highlighting especially some sections of South Asia. However, keeping in mind the time constraint, some parts only I will be highlighting right now, which will be concerning the water bodies of South Asia, including things like lakes, rivers, dams, glaciers, delta, sea, and of course the ocean, the Indian Ocean. Now, keeping in mind the time limitation again, I have particularly chosen some features, some characteristics of these water bodies. And certain things like natural calamities across bunds and dams, tidal bores, surges, cyclones, overflooding as a result of heavy precipitation or rainfall, or heavy melting of snow in the upper reaches of the Himalayas, especially during spring and summer, as well as the historical navigation across the ocean, which has been taking place roughly across the last 2,500 years around the Indian Ocean, at least historically can be dated from that time. I will be beginning this presentation looking into the upper reaches of my study area, which is the Himalaya and the Hindu Kush mountain area. And gradually, geographically, I will move downwards towards finally towards the Indian Ocean. And it is also important on the onset for me to mention some very important aspect, that here I am talking about water bodies. And water bodies are something that transcends all geographical boundaries and barriers. And thus, when I'm speaking about a particular geographical area or a country, I would also be mentioning certain neighboring countries whenever I am referring to water bodies within that context. So to speak about it, I start by looking at the topmost section of my area of research of the region of Afghanistan, and a section referred to as the Bande Amir lakes. Now, Afghanistan, a mountainous region, and a section of the Hazarajat mountain range has a section called as the Baba, which stretches towards the west around 200 kilometers into the Bamiyan cave, the Bamiyan region area. Now, where the Bamiyan region joins into the Safidko and the Siako and the Tirband-e-Turkestan ranges. This mountain happens to support a very wide range of animals, including leopards and bears, deer, boars, wild boars, etc. And also a large number of significantly sparkling white, pristine, clean rivers like the Kabul, Helmand, Harirud, Murghab, Arghandab, and the Khashrud. And very interestingly, along with these rivers, a quite large number of natural lakes like the Band-e-Panir, Band-e-Barbar, Band-e-Amir, Band-e-Chalma, and Band-e-Haibat. Now, the water of these lakes are extremely clear. Almost one can see the river beds from the top surrounding the area. And they often attract tourists because of this pristine blue beauty across the mountain area. And they have innumerable stories about the creation of these natural lakes, which is especially I can mention about the Yakao Langi Hazaras of the area within the a tribe who actually highlights and speaks very fondly of these tales, which I'm going to mention right now. Now, these tales highlights very significantly the son-in-law of the Prophet, Imam Ali, who is reputed to have been the person to build, according to the folklore, to build the lakes. Now, the ones that I'm going to mention right now has three versions, very popular in the area, especially amidst the tribes that I was mentioning about. The first one, and a very, very popular one, speaks about the Silk Route, speaks about two religions existing at the same time in the region, and definitely highlights the geomorphology of the area. So the first folktale is that once upon a time, presumably around 14 centuries ago, the Bamiyan region was ruled by this specific Zoroastrian king Zamir. Now, he had many merchants who used to pass by his kingdom, his region, because of the Silk Route. Now, one day, he actually captured, made captive the wife and daughter of a specific merchant. And he refused to let them go in spite of the merchant pleading for a very long time. Now, this merchant decided to reach Arabia and sought the help of the Prophet, who recommended him to his son-in-law, Imam Ali. Now, Imam Ali told the merchant that you should be going back to Zamir and demand the freedom of your wife and daughter. And he also gave him the sword, his sword called as Zulfikar. Now, the merchant accordingly returned, spoke to the king and demanded the freedom of his wife and daughter. Now, the king did agree, but on a condition that he should complete three tasks. One was to build a dam across the free-flowing rivers because it used to cause a lot of flooding, and nobody could build a dam so far. Secondly, to kill a specific dragon which used to reside in the area. And thirdly, to bring in front of him Imam Ali. Now, with the help of this sword that Imam Ali had given the merchant, he built a dam, which was called as the Zulfikar Lake. He tore up plans further to build the Band-e-Pudina. He requested the local Hazara woman to give him a generous amount of paneer, cottage cheese, through which he built up the Band-e-Paneer. And a fourth dam was built called as Band-e-Haibat, or the prestigious dam. Then he went on to build the fifth dam with the help of his squire called as Band-e-Kambar, or the band of. Now, this nobleman, this entire area taken together forms the Band-e-Amir Lakes. And he finally made Imam Ali come and meet the king. Now, though the king at first had Imam Ali arrested and put in chains, But miraculously, Imam Ali freed himself from all the chains, and the king was very amazed to see the magical abilities of Imam Ali, and he surrendered and became his follower and gave up his own religion, Zoroastrianism. A second version of folklore in the region speaks about a specific king of Balkh near the region of Mazar-e Sharif, who wanted to regulate, that is, control the water of the river Kuchtuk. Though he asked the people for help, but nobody, none of the people could help him finally. So he asked finally Imam Ali to help, and he created the first lake, Bande Khamar. Though the river flow was controlled, but the local people had no water for irrigation. Thus, Ali created 5 nicks in the same lake, which acted as these natural dams to regulate the water flow, and so gradually it could reach the agricultural fields. A third interesting story connects to the first Mughal ruler of India, Babur. Now, once when Babur was ruling there around 1483 to 1530, which is historically the time he was there, huge flooding often used to take place because of the melting of the snow in the upper reaches of the mountains. Now, he attempted to build dams, but was completely, he could not succeed in that. So Imam Ali, the son-in-law of the Prophet, came to help. He made the first dam by cutting the top of the mountain with his sword, Zulfikar, and thus the Zulfikar Dam was built. But still the floods continued. So Ali set up on building more dams. He dug up plants to make the Pudina Dam. He then asked the woman to make paneer or cottage cheese for him, with the help of which he built Bande Paneer. And then he created an enormous block to stop the flow of water in his anger. And this was Bande Haibat, or meaning anger. At last, Babur ordered his slaves to build the Gulaman Dam, the dam of slaves. Now, Hazarabad is one of the very cold areas of Afghanistan. The mountains covered in snow generally is between October to May, and still it has several green valleys surrounding the area. A close study of the geomorphology, the sedimentation analysis, and the archaeology of the region seems to relate to these stories as superimposing little glacial age events on ancient myths. It could be explained by an increase of rainfall with more snow, and above all, a temperature increase causing the melting of further snow and the flooding of the downstream valleys, and a temporary fear in the people who used to live there about this flooding. Many detailed studies have been done recently, and especially I can mention about studies published across 2016, 2017, which speaks about this entire geology of the region. Yeah, this is a topographical map of the Bande lakes. The details of the publication is given next to it, and you can see that including the Zulfikar Lake and all the other bunds are situated very close to each other and covers a very close proximity area, but the region is quite vast in the area that it covers. These lakes and the Bamiyan area are very fragile because of their complex geological history, and also because it's situated in a very heavily seismic zone, earthquakes. It is a zone of high risk floods, freezing temperatures, earthquakes, and rock avalanches caused by high altitude and their presence in the seismically active Himalayan alpine belt. These natural forces have affected local population from the very first time settlers arrived here, possibly arguably stated to be from the Bactrian region. The natural dams of this region are continental bioherms or phytoherms. The remarkable and unique appearance in this high and cold desert-like environment inspired the local nomadic communities to develop legends and myths that recorded and interpreted natural geological and biological facts. These legends and myths were accepted, assimilated, and perpetuated by different religions and cultural groups, so that their most important message has been to warn the inhabitants of the geological hazard of the region. This is one small area of it. And we move on to looking at the next very close proximity area of the Indus River, covering primarily this story would be covering the upper reaches of the Indus River, Pakistan, parts of Ladakh and Tibet. Now, the country of Pakistan, very well drained with the 5 tributaries of the Indus River. We all know about it. The Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Bias and Satluj, along with the parent river, the Indus. Now, there are many stories in folklore which speaks of volumes about these rivers as well as the parent river. Interestingly, many of the stories are love stories as a channel of communication almost between two opposing warring parties of culture in the same cultural setting, two opposing warring parties. Finally, many of these stories, the river is the ultimate signal within these two bodies, and they play a role between these warring parties as a reconciling platform, like Heer Ranjha, Soni Mahiwal, and others. Unfortunately, the unhappy ending of many of these love stories is something to note interestingly. The also is a reflection of both the positive as well as the negative aspects of a river body. Just like the rivers themselves, just like Indus or its mighty tributaries, the names of these folklore heroes remain etched in oral traditions of the region for posterity, for all future uses. However, what I'm going to mention over here is somehow, however, a very interesting aspect of the river Indus, which makes it very unique in the world of perennial rivers. An important lore is associated with it, which covers the region of India, parts of Tibet, and here I am talking about tidal bores. Speaking about Indus, it is one of the very few rivers of the world to exhibit a tidal bore. What it is, I will be explaining just now. The river Indus is largely fed by the snows and glaciers of the Himalayas, the Karakoram and the Hindu Kush ranges of Tibet, the Indian states and union territories of Ladakh and Himachal Pradesh, and the Gilgit-Baltistan region of Pakistan, especially the breadbasket of Punjab province, which accounts for most of the nation's agricultural production, and Sindh. Now, the word Punjab means the land of 5 rivers. And the 5 rivers are, I have mentioned earlier, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Satluj, finally merging into the Indus. The Indus also supports many heavy industries and provides the main supply of potable water to Pakistan. The ultimate source of the Indus is in Tibet region. It begins at the confluence of the Senghe and Gar rivers and drains the Nanglong and Kangri and Gangdisa-Shan mountain ranges. The Indus then flows northwest through Ladakh and Baltistan into Gilgit, just south of the Karakoram range. The Kabul River, coming from Afghanistan, also joins the Indus near Attock. Some of the following slides speaks about this one specifically showing a topmost satellite version of river. You can see the upper reaches covered with snow, as a result of which the melting of the snow, heavy flooding is caused every time during spring and summer. Part of it in Leh, very pristine, very untouched beauty. Part of it in Pakistan. And something very interesting is the fury, the mightiness referred to in a miniature painting dating to the time of Akbar, which speaks about his ancestor Babur and the troops crossing the mountain ranges. I had just now spoken about Babur's presence in the Afghanistan area. And this is something that they had to often cross to reach India by path, crossing the rivers as well as the mountain region. Now, coming back to my focus of the tidal bore in the Indus, what is a tidal bore? Now, this is something, though not from the Indus thing, but this is the best picture I could actually get from to explain the concept of a tidal bore. This is from China. This is a huge amount of wave which practically covers the entire width of the water body, and it's very disconcerting practically to see this surging at a height of 12-13 feet the entire water body as a single wave and crashing into the entire population, houses, trees, whatever is there in the bank, and causing a lot of destruction in the process. Now, this is generally also often seen at the region where a river meets the sea. One of the earliest known records of historical record, incidentally, of this tidal bore comes from Indus. And this I'm talking about historically, the story dates to the time of Alexander and his attempts to reach India, and obviously his dream, as all of us knows, about capturing India. And Alexander's army had no idea from his Mediterranean region what a tidal bore is and what can be the destruction of a tidal bore. So they were very taken aback when they suddenly were facing this tidal bore in their path when they were floating down south to reach the mouth of the sea. The year was 325 AD. And as the great wave advanced up the river, ship collisions occurred and his entire fleet, horses, everything was thrown away. Many of his ships were swept out of the main channel into the previously dry land and stranded. Fortunately for Alexander and his fleet, a bore, similar bore, tidal bore, the next day happened to refloat the ship back into the sea. It is like exactly being thrown back into the sea. They proceeded thus into the Indus River once again. Now, for Alexander, who had never witnessed something like this was a hugely, humongously scary condition. This incident, how we get to know about it, is from the Greek historian Quintus Curtius around 50 AD. In his book, History of the Life and Reign of Alexander the Great, which speaks about this voyage, the meeting with the entire tidal bore, and the journey down the river from Patala to the ocean, and an extremely vivid description of how the tidal bore completely destroyed Alexander's army, his ships, his horses, scattering them all around the region, and almost making them go and be thrown into the ocean, the open ocean. Now, since Alexander's time, about 80 tidal bores have been recorded in different places in the world. However, it is a story of the past. Many of the rivers which used to demonstrate tidal bores do not have it, including Indus, incidentally. There have been climatic changes, rivers have been dammed, rivers have been made into bunds, as a result of which tidal bores almost no longer occurs, including in the Indus. Incidentally, places like the Seine River in France, places like the Colorado in US, nowhere it used to happen. Now, tidal bores cannot be seen in any place apart from the Amazon River, which is the only place where this natural phenomena is still witnessed. And coming over to the similar section of the Tibet region, when I'm speaking about Indus, in the close proximity is a very interesting region of Bhutan, followed by Nepal. Speaking about Bhutan, I highlight here the Drangmechu River, which practically is the Manas River, which connects Bhutan as well as India. The Manas River is the largest river system in Bhutan, and its Bhutanese name is Drangmechu. It is 376 kilometers long and flows across Bhutan, spanning 272 kilometers, and covers the rest 104 kilometers by passing through the Indian state of Assam. It eventually drains into the Brahmaputra before draining into the Bay of Bengal in India. The Drangmechu originates from West Kameng district of Arunachal Pradesh in India and enters Bhutan through Kashigang. It covers Rongsha Valley and Bumthang Valley and broadly covers the district of Eastern Bhutan. It is divided into 3 rivers in Bhutan, namely Mangdechu, Bumthangchu, and Drangmechu. The word chu actually means river in their language, Bhutanese language. The river has great economic significance in the country. It serves for irrigation purposes for farmers, a very rich natural resource region. Additionally, the river also adds up to be a natural beauty, adding to the surroundings. It flows through the Royal Manas National Park, located in southern Bhutan, and absolutely adds further to the beauty of the region. A very important river, the Drangmechu, has several stories which incidentally and very interestingly forbids people, especially children, as well as the shepherds and cowherds, to take the livestock near to the river. Why is this? Bhutanese people believe that there are a lot of spirits which dwell. You can see the region, the banks and all are full of greenery. According to several folklores, a tree spirit called as the Nepo resides in them, and if anybody practically cuts down this forested area, one would be stricken by either death or very serious disease. This belief has also helped to a certain extent to preserve and conserve some part of the ecology and the aquatic biodiversity around the rivers of Bhutan. Now, keeping people away, a very important myth is there about a octopus-like monster, especially in the regions of Punchu and Muchu, which has tentacles and flies out of the river and drags anybody who is in the bank into the river body. And this is something which is even associated with often cattle disappear, and it is ascribed that the monster has dragged it into the river. Children, something happened to them. It is described that something has happened to the children if they have been dragged into the river by the monster. Interestingly, there is also stories about mermaids residing within the river. Positive stories, not negative stories, which speaks about the mermaids protecting the river overall. They, one particular story speaks about a mute lover from the Baduthang area. At times, the lover used to come and meet the mermaid and see that the entire river is kept very peaceful. These stories, all of these stories, facts to stay away from the river, stay away from the vegetation cover, stay away from the water body, stems from the fact that the rivers, primarily the three rivers which I mentioned right now, is prone to very heavy flooding because of abrupt fluctuations of water levels, which is a very disadvantage, especially for development of hydropower projects. The water level of Drangmechu rises very sharply without any warning. And anytime the dam water is released, this becomes more of a havoc, especially during summer season or during the monsoon season. The water level rises sharply, destroying everything all around. Thus, kids and cattle is often warned about in this folklore to refrain from going into the region and to stay away from the banks, far away from the banks of the rivers. Today, however, there are two very important things plaguing the river. One being the development of an hydropower project, and the second one is thrash. These two, however, the Bhutanese government is still deliberating upon a very planned execution, proper execution plan for the hydropower development. And a very important thing to understand the value of a free-flowing river should be sans any kind of thrash. So thrash management. These are the two important things plaguing the river, and something that practically adds further to the folklore, mentioning that please stay away from the river, keep it clean, keep it pristine, and let nature breathe on its own. Coming over and moving over to the next region, joining region, I speak of Nepal, also along with Tibet and India. And here I am talking about the Karnali River, which happens to be, till date, the only free-flowing river of Nepal. The Karnali River is also known as Mapcha Khambab in Tibet, which means the river originating from a peacock's mouth. The Mapcha Khambab becomes the Karnali in Nepal, and in India, it becomes the Ghagra. The Karnali is 507 kilometers long and is Nepal's longest river. It is the largest tributary of the Ganga by the volume of water it carries. It is in western Nepal. This is also called as the only free-flowing river of Nepal, though there is a proposed hydropower project for the upper Karnali reaches, but it's still not being built, and considerations is still underway. And the project is supposed to have an installed capacity of 900 megawatts, making it the largest hydropower project plant in Nepal when it finally is done. Now, the river, this mighty Kanali, has obviously many folklores associated with it. Here, I will be talking about this specific folklore, a very, very popular, famous one, that speaks about this aging fish couple who used to reside in the Karnali River. The name of the male fish was Matsya and the female fish was Devi. Now, they used to live in this specific pond of the Karnali River near the village of Chipra. In this pond, fishing was not allowed. So the fishes used to live to a very ripe old age, like this couple that I'm talking about. The pond was on the side of a crematorium, and the fishes grew largely very healthy from the bones and the ashes that used to float into the river, as well as the rice, which used to be often thrown by the people who, the family people who used to be visiting the crematorium areas. So one day, this aging couple were having a talk, and Matsya started to show a lot of irritation because of the muddy waters during the time of monsoon. This conversation was taking place. And mentioning that they would be dying soon, Devi started to console him by saying that why don't we go and take a pilgrimage and visit Mount Kailash, the abode of Lord Shiva. Now, though Matsya was in two minds whether or not to go because he was very old, whether he will survive the journey or not. But finally, Devi convinced him by saying that, reminding him of the story of the Matsya avatar from the Vishnu Puran, the mythology of Vishnu Puran, the Matsya avatar of incarnation of Vishnu, mentioning that Vishnu himself had taken the Matsya form, incarnation form, and he would be looking after them so that they remain alive and everybody in history gets to know about them. So they will not be harmed at all. So finally convinced, the aging couple started to go down the river in their pilgrimage. But as they started to move along in the monsoon waters, their strength started to gradually slow down. Finally, when they reached Kolsi, they realized that they will not be surviving the journey anymore. Matsya's guts gave out. Devi's body too started to completely become limp. And they were craving to eat some grains of rice to keep them a little healthy and alive in their last moments. Suddenly, Devi jumped out of the river into the bank and saw some grains of rice scattered in the bank. She called Matsya, who also leaped out, and together they not only saw the grain of rice, but for the very first time, they saw the wonderful river house that they used to live in. Sparkling waters, dancing waters, and they realized that they had been living in paradise their whole life. So it doesn't matter whether they have actually reached Mount Kailash, because for them, they understood that they have already reached paradise themselves. Their bodies started to gradually get limp. Next day morning, they were dead. Over a period of time, it hardened into a small rock, which started to grow larger and bigger in size. Just like Vishnu's Matsya avatar, which started to grow from a tiny fish to a huge fish, leading to what we know about the story about saving the world with the help of Manu. In time, the grain of rice which these two couple had seen started to scatter in the area, giving rise to a rice field, agricultural field. People started to come and live there, and the rice fields grew. And even today, we get to see this fish couple to stand next to each other in Dharapuri, the habitation which sprang up as a result of the fields of rice which have been influenced by this two aging couple. Now, the Karnali is known as a wild river. It is often prone to floods, especially during the summer and the monsoon region because of heavy rainfall and melting of the snow in the upper reaches of the Himalaya. The annual precipitation over the Tarai and Sivalik ranges generally from 1000 to 2000 millimeter. Annual precipitation in the middle ranges is around 2000 to 3000 millimeter. About 80% of this precipitation falls between June and September during the South Asian monsoon. And during this period, the river flow tremendously increases, causing severe floods in the Karnali. This is specifically a report I am specifying over here from ISET. That's the cover which speaks about the 2014 heavy, massive flooding of the Karnali village being evacuated. And on the right-hand side, you can see an estimation from the 1960s onwards about the heavy flooding, on and off heavy flooding, almost every year flooding of the Karnali. Apart from this, in spite of all the ferocity, the wildness of the Karnali, very interesting to note that this extensive river body crossing Tibet and Nepal and then finally India is a huge area, very important area of aquatic biodiversity. A study was conducted recently by the USAID PANI program along with the Center for Molecular Dynamics in Nepal across 5 strategic stretches of the Karnali between June 2018 and June 2019. They found an additional 50 species of fishes in addition to the existing 125 fishes which were already recognized in the Karnali. Apart from that, there are huge amount of mammals in the Karnali, around 53 mammals including rhinoceros, wild elephant, Bengal tiger, swamp deer and the Gangetic dolphin, and birds, 407 species of bird like the Bengal florican, white-rumped vulture, peafowl and the bar-headed geese. And there is also the very important Bardia National Park on the eastern bank of the Karnali, formed in 1988, which covers an area of 968 square kilometer, which is the largest national park in Nepal's Tarai region. This specific story thus takes into account this entire range of the aquatic biodiversity, which I just spoke about, in spite of the wildness, in spite of the ferocity, in spite of the fury of the river, which is very well known, and the destruction that it causes every year. This story speaks about two important factors. In spite of the mighty of the wild river, its massive flooding, the river has stayed alive as an important source of wildlife, especially the fishes, which supports a lot of fishermen, a very, very major industry in the area. Also, the portrayal of the river as the main source of life around it is important. Thus, the rice fields, the villages are all symbolisms of the reflection of paradise, heaven. This is the constructive, settling power of the Karnali, which has been kept alive in this specific, very popular lore of the region. I move along towards the next region of adjoining regions of India and Bangladesh, and a very significant part of water body constituting the Sundarban area. Now, specifically, I chose this because of the heavy cyclonic destruction that was ravaged the entire area, Cyclone Amphan, across the last just around 12 days back, not only leaving Calcutta completely destroyed, but causing a massive destruction in this area, Sundarban, that I am speaking about. The Sundarban is also called as the Athero Bhiter Desh, speaking meaning 18, the land of the 18 ebb tides. It is also called as Tat Bhumi, which means Tat meaning bank of a river and Bhumi means obviously land. Also in the local dialect, it means sunken land. And the Sundarban, incidentally, is a historical place geologically. Why? Because it is the single block of tidal halophytic mangrove of the world, which is also the resident of the Bengal tiger. The covering more than 10,000 square kilometers of deltaic floodplains across Bangladesh and India, the Sundarban region contains arguably the largest continuous block of mangrove ecosystem remaining in the world. Much of the present tidal delta only stabilized around 5th to 7th century AD, and the formation of the lower delta plain started around the middle Holocene, and most of the presently occupied area of 10,017 square kilometer was formed across the area of the last 6,000 years. There are some, these are some of the pictures that I wanted to show, speaking about the area covered in the Sundarban, which I just spoke about, the mangrove, and the only mangrove exhibiting the traits, such a large area, along with the being the habitation of the Bengal tiger. It is internationally recognized for its high biodiversity, mangrove flora and fauna, supported by aquatic and terrestrial environment. And of course, drained by a large number of tributaries on both the eastern as well as the western side. There is a list that you can see in front of you on part of India as well as Bangladesh, which carries fresh water down into the areas, into the finer areas of Bay of Bengal. Thus, the unique ecosystem is a very delicate balance between freshwater flows and the tributaries and distributaries of the Ganges-Brahmaputra system of both saline as well as freshwater. These rivers, along with their distributaries, form a number of islands at the mouth of the bay, and thus they form a network of creeks which are always fed by daily tides. Now, these creeks are erosional in nature. Especially across the last couple of 100 years, a lot of erosion has happened through cyclones and storm surges. However, interestingly, the Sundarban is internationally recognized for its high biodiversity mangrove flora and fauna, and there are many folklore which is associated with this flora and fauna. Here I will be highlighting about two important aspects. The first one speaks about this slide. It's a mask basically that I am showing over here, a tiger looking mask. Speaks about the story of Dokhin Rai. Widely recognized as the chief deity in association to the Sundarbans, Dokhin Rai is said to be the shape-shifting god who rules over the demons and the beasts that prowl the heavily forested wetlands. Different rituals are performed for Dokhin Rai every new moon, during which animals are sacrificed, music is played all night long to appease him. If not, the fear is the reason for doing this. If not, he might change into a tiger and come out every night to devour whoever enters the forest, dares to enter the forest. Accordingly, it is customary everywhere to first respect, pay obeisance, and revere Dokhin Rai before entering the forest, so that he doesn't send any tigers on the way of the person who is entering. In some tribes, before entering the forest, men often wear a mask with Dokhin Rai's face on it to ward off any potential danger. This is one of the designs of that same thing of the mask, which is often used even now. Secondly, I would like to speak about the stories of Bon Bibi, which speaks of a deity, a female deity, with the help of her brother Shah Jongli, lives in the Sundarban forest and protects the region from the fearful onslaughts of Dokhin Rai, with whom she seems to be eternally at war. It is believed that Bon Bibi and Dokhin Rai will be arch enemies until the end of time. Woodcutters and honey collectors recall her before entering the forest, pay their respects, so that they may receive protection from Dokhin Rai and the ravages of the tiger if they meet one. Interestingly, Bon Bibi figures in the religious rituals of both Hindus and Muslims in the region. She appears in a Ma Durga-like form. You can see one of the temples over here for her Hindu followers, and as a female monk, Pirani, for her Muslim followers. Now, folk tales, all of them, very interestingly, speaks about, on one side, the need for the protection of natural vegetation, on the other, for a protection of the people, the inhabitants of the region. Interestingly enough, this also helps to portray a situation of helplessness of humans in front of the onslaughts, the fury, and the massive anger of nature whenever it occurs. Thus, a need for protection from the same. Incidentally, the Sundarbans was in the recent news for the disaster wreaked by the cyclone Amphan around May 20 to 21. Very interestingly enough, the above folk tales once again connects to this destruction which was caused by this very, very massive cyclone, and the portrayed and reflected the helplessness of man in front of the very severe fury of nature. Amphan hit the coastal areas in Orissa, West Bengal, and Bangladesh, causing the maximum damage in West Bengal, not only Kolkata, but regions of Hooghly, Howrah, East Medinipur, North and South 24 Parganas were massively destroyed, places which are still reeling under the condition and are yet to recover even across these last 2 weeks when the entire thing had taken place. At its peak, this specific uh, cyclone sustained a wind speed of 155 to 165 kilometers per hour, spiraling up to 185 kilometers per hour, which is like a massive, massive destructive speed. The storm hit West Bengal and Bangladesh on the coast on Wednesday evening with a pounding wind and torrential rain, inflating sea waters to swell up to a height of 12 feet tidal waves. Now, to keep in mind, the Sundarban area has been facing earlier cyclonic onslaughts as well. There are massive historical records across the colonial times, as well as recent as 2019, 2009, and 2007. Huge amount of lands lay waste by the mixing of saline water into the agricultural field as well as the fresh water, and of course the death of people as well as animals. Now, this is something that I wanted to show as part of a connection that I will be mentioning right now. Entire thing depiction from the colonial times, because from 1970, because the Sundarbans have been facing massive destruction ever since the last, generally between 1841 to 1954, especially the colonial times, to clear the area for more and more agriculture, for more and more taxes to be accumulated from the region. In the west side of the Sundarban, just a second, I wanted to show this first.
Here, madam.
In the west side of the
madam.
Yes.
Ma'am.
Yes.
We are running between
Hello?
the times, huh? There is a time constraint, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, yes. I'll be just finishing off. Just give me around 5 minutes. I'll finish off. Yes. Okay.
You
Now,
can take your time. Just I'm telling.
Yes, yes. I'll finishing off just 5 more minutes, 5 to 10 more minutes. Now,
Okay,
in the west side, you can see this entire mangrove vegetation being cut off has always been acting as a buffer area for the cyclonic weather, which, having been cut and degraded heavily, is the reason for these massive onslaughts of the cyclonic weather of the region. And finally, I come down, I'll just generally take more 5 minutes, to the region of the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka and Maldives, connecting it to the two massive countries, island countries of the Indian Ocean, neighbors of India. The Sri Lanka specifically speaks about a location in Indian Ocean, southwest of the Bay of Bengal, and southeast of the Arabian Sea. It is geographically separated from the Indian subcontinent by the Gulf of Mannar and the Palk Strait. Maldives, on the other hand, speaks about 28 natural atolls comprising of 1194 islands. Historically, Maldives had a strategic importance because of its location on the major marine routes of the Indian Ocean, and the nearest neighbor, India and Sri Lanka, had always maintained navigational contact with it across the last, as historical can be traced, 2000 years. There is an important story which I'm going to mention over here, which connects the entire region of India, Maldives as well as Sri Lanka. And this comes from the Buddhist chronicle, Sinhala Buddhist chronicle from Sri Lanka, the Mahavamsa, which speaks about the earliest settlers in the region, the king of the region, Prince Vijaya, who came from the ancient city of Sinhapura in India, eastern parts of India. It is mentioned that Prince Vijaya reached, started off towards Sri Lanka, and one of his ships got diverted and floated towards the Maldives. And according to this Mahavamsa, it is dated to around 543 to 483 BC. This ship seems to have reached, as is mentioned in the Mahavamsa, to reach a place called as Mahila Dvipika, which is identified with Maldives. It is also said that at that time, the people of Mahila Dvipika used to continuously travel between Sri Lanka and India. Thus, the settlements in this area has close affinity of language and culture with both India and Sri Lanka. Like the language Divehi is very similar and close in proximity in grammar and phonology to the language of Sri Lanka, which is Sinhalese, and also the more ancient Elu Prakrit, which is very less part of Pali. Though the prehistory of Sri Lanka speaks about a habitation around more than 125,000 years, possibly even as far back as 500,000 years. However, the Mahavamsa speaks about the first settler, the first king, being Prince Vijaya from that 5th century BC, who also came to be the first formal king of Sri Lanka. Prince Vijaya traveled across the Indian Ocean and reached Sri Lanka and established the first kingdom here. Side by side, his followers established the first kingdom in Maldives, in the Mahila Dvipika. Both Sri Lanka and Maldives had relations with India from a very long ancient times, probably very much influenced by the Kalinga region of ancient India, who were the first sea traders to both of these regions, being Sri Lanka and Maldives. A close study of the culture, customs, and languages of both these places, the countries, also reveal that they were influenced by India and had settlers traveling to these destinations from very ancient times. In fact, one particular community in Maldives, the Giravaru people, can speak about their folklore with the establishment of the capital and king in Malé. The reason for the ancient name of Maldives as Mahila Dvipika is also with the fact that queens used to, very interestingly, queens used to rule the area from very ancient period and not king. Several foreign travelers have also spoken about the rule of queens in Maldives, many Arab travelers later on as well. Finally, the narratives, all of these helps to identify a relation between the different features of water bodies across South Asia with history, folklore, and geology. Of course, there is much more remaining to explore further. This is just a tiny aspect of the entire region, covering some parts and some features of the water bodies that I spoke about, and can be a backdrop for even anybody is interested to look into it for a larger area of research in later times. And with this, I would like to end my presentation and thank the audience for being patient listeners. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, madam. And I am now, if Meera madam is feeling convenient and if she is not having any issue regarding meeting, then I can give the podium to her, this online podium to her, madam. Meera madam, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Ushma.
But if there's
Hello.
a constraint,
Good
yes,
afternoon.
very good. Very good morning.
Very good morning, and this. Yeah.
Yeah, you can take your time. If 10 minutes, then also it's okay for us.
No issues. I will be starting with my presentation. I will ask you to please allow me to share my screen.
Okay, surely, ma'am.
And I will be shutting off my video because I want everybody to focus more on my PPT than on my face.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
No issues. I will be starting with my presentation. I will ask you to please allow me to share my screen. And I will be shutting off my video because I want everybody to focus more on my PPT than on my face.
Yes, Dr. Meera Vasani madam is an assistant professor at Department of English in IIT RAM Ahmedabad. Her research interest includes diaspora studies, identity crisis, Canadian studies, eco-criticism, and even tribal literature, culture, and sustainability. She has presented number of papers and conferences, both home and abroad, and she has inserted in international conferences also. She has delivered plenary, international, and national level speeches. She is an executive member of Indian Association of Canadian Studies. She is the coordinator of Gujarat region for SLA also. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you for your highly motivated, inspirational speech and introduction. I hope I am not new to my colleagues as well as to my students who are in and around me. I would like one guidance because I'm not able to share my screen somehow. I think you are supposed to enable me.
You are enabled, madam.
Okay, yeah, now it's fine. I am able. Thank you for your my dear, yeah, I can see now. It's okay. It's okay. Yes, dear colleagues and those who are aspirants to study Go Green or who are aspirant in continue their career with eco-criticism or ecology. We all know that literature and arts have been drawing many portrayals parallel to our physical environment and human environment, and the interactions are very much visible in our fictional or non-fictional works that we come across daily now and then. The modern environmentalist movement, which probably is not very long before, but is recently in after 1960s probably, yes, give rise to a rich array of fictional and non-fictional writings which are concerned towards human changing relationship with the natural world, where human habitat and human species, as well as in collaboration, in continuation with other species in nature, where N is always capital, deals along with lot many interactions within and without. Moving further, I will be rushing off because as I know you people are also with a constraint of time, me too having the same thing. Ecological literature and its perception has been varying day to day and timely. If we start with the fundamentals or the ecological literature that we come across daily, I will like to focus on few of the writers who initiated this particular period called eco-criticism or ecological study along with literature with a different perception. In US, it is known as eco-criticism, and the writer's focus mainly is on nature, where N is always in a transcendental approach. Ralph Waldo Emerson, if you have heard the name, his transcendental approach believes that God pervades in nature. So always, whatever is nature is God for us, for him. And that is quite resembling to what we can say in our Upanishads, where we worshipped nature as God. And today also, we worship sun, moon, tree, animals, and whatnot. Henry David Thoreau suggested that reality can be best perceived only and only through nature. Margaret Fuller distinguishes between utilitarian motive of the settlers and the spiritual aesthetics and vision. Her works are full of aestheticism and nature, again nature with an utilitarian motives if one is going through. Robert Frost, the renowned poet, always speaks about the perennial beauty that nature has. Moving towards UK, if I say it is popularly known, or eco-criticism is popularly known as green studies, deeply rooted in romanticism. And we all know Wordsworth is the highly admired priest of the nature, and his interest in the English Lake country is the most striking note of all of his creativity. Thomas Hardy and his Wessex novels Especially Hardy writes in Return to the Native that he is always nature is always supposed to be in harmony with man, and should man also should maintain the same harmony with the nature. Moving further, if I come to the recent century, when William Wordsworth in Ecocrism, the essay describes ecology. What is ecology? Is a study of relationship between species and its habitats. Why all this background? What is the purpose of doing this? Maybe the question that may be asked. I'm trying to focus today through this what all phases eco-criticism has passed through, what all phases are to be touched upon by Indian authors or Indian critics or Indian research scholars, those who are aspirant towards moving towards eco-criticism. There are many arenas which yet to be, we are supposed to touch, and we have varied versions where we can see the trajectory, and we can see where we can get involved into with our own research, and we can present for the better life. So I will be dealing with Lawrence Burrell's special essays, and wherein he is describing eco-criticism has passed through two phases, two waves, and we are going to study it one by one, and we'll see how it is touching us. As we all know, eco-criticism emerged as a study of relationship between literature and the nature environment in mid-1990s. And according to Lawrence Burrell, two waves of eco-criticism is there. First wave, where the effect of culture is traced out or appraised by the critics upon nature. What culture is doing to nature, and what harm we are creating through political actions. Therefore, if we see in first wave, during the first wave, the aim was Earth's care. Earth was in the center, and critics were revolving around Earth, keeping the what we call Earth and its care in mind. Whereas in second wave, it is known as revisionist eco-criticism. It seeks to investigate, or rather think about what urbanization, what industrialization has done to the culture, to the nature, and how we are degrading or devaluating the natural world. So here in the second wave, which Lawrence Burrell is focusing, wherein we are stepped into, we need to think how and what are the eco-injustices that we are passing through in the society, and almost all the works that you see nowadays are majorly focusing on it. To further understand the discrimination or the division or the vis-a-vis between first wave and second wave, as you can see, in the first wave, the focus of literary interpretation of natural world was in poetry, fiction, or non-fiction, was to evoke or promote the contact with the nature. It was totally biocentric. Individual experiences and oriental ethics and aesthetics were given the priority. And in the first wave critics, if I want to give the example of few, then yes, William Wordsworth will stand Thoreau's attachment toward Waldenwood, the intimacy that we can see of John Carl, the romantic poet, towards the vanishing traditional landscape of early 19th century. All these are the examples of first wave eco-critics and eco-criticism. When we go to second wave, there we find literature is pertaining to metropolis and industrialization. And therefore, our focus from biocentric has turned to a socio-centric approach, where environmental justice was the main concern. The concern for the critics in the second wave became, and that too, that I'm talking about the last decade, that is 2000s, the years that we can say. Early here, the cross-pollination of literature, environment, and post-colonial studies is seen. Intersection between eco-criticism and post-colonial studies that began, especially during this early 2000s, marked a further stage in the integration of discourse about the social, local and the global. Earlier, it was think globally, act locally. That was what the, into inverted commas, we have been thinking about. And this in this encounter, especially the second wave encounter of the eco-criticism, these two areas of study, it became clear that eco-critical frameworks had most often been national or even nationalist. Whereas in post-colonial, if you say, approaches tend to focus on transnational and cosmopolitan webs of connection. So we are not mixing these two, post-colonialism and eco-criticism. They are two different things, and how it is different, we just enumerated. Moving further, if I want to draw some line in length, which Lopamudra madam was, though I was not for the whole session present, but whatever I got the crux from is, like what eco-critics, what literature, and how literature can be taking the help of sciences and ecology and what we call with the help of this chemist, the relationship, and we can draw a line in length and we can be helpful. That is called interdisciplinary aspect. What is the characteristics of eco-criticism? Basically, it should be interdisciplinary. It studies nature, we all know. It also pleads for the revolution that is there. And it studies inner and outer self, as well as inner and outer of the writer, of the reader, and of the interpreter even. There is another one trend which is very much now in what we call currently very much admired by the literary artist. It is narratorology, and eco-narratorology comes in picture, wherein till date what was the scene, whatever writer has filled for the nature, we were trying to analyze that. But now narratology is focusing on what writer has written, leave it. What you are interpreting, leave it. But when you are reading it as a reader, what do you have the feeling of? That is inner and outer study of, that is again a novel area which we can explore a lot. Generally, eco-criticism investigates how nature is portrayed in art, what is the role played by the surroundings, how human culture is associated with natural environment and all this. Moving further, if I want to connect literature, science, and environment by any means, then eco-criticism relationship to the natural sciences has always been extraordinarily ambivalent. If I want to say, we rely on the insights of biologists, ecologists, and chemists as the base of their claims about the nature or research findings on natural sciences, etc. Some eco-critics have seen their connection that scientific research has left a distinctive mark on their literature studies and literature review. If I want to give you the example, then Joseph Carroll and Glenn Love, in the spirit of E.O. Wilson's Conscience, that is the work, inverted commas, Conscience, here they aim to make evolutionary theory that basis and says like literature and culture both are interrelated. Culture, they argue, is based on the adapted mind. What is literature? What is culture? Culture is based upon the adapted mind, a biological constraint set of cognitive and motivational characteristics. So if I want to draw a parallel line between this literature, culture, and sciences, then we can say that whatever we get in literature, it is because of the training that is received by the nature and that too by the sciences. So when madam was definitely explaining about Bone BB and the lion, Sundarban lions, then at that time we have seen that there is a tale of Bone BB. As I am dealing with tribal culture of Gujarat especially, if somebody is interested to study ecology and tribal literature of Gujarat, especially Konkana community, Bili community, and Garasya community, then you can see that there are various ways of catching fish. We catch a fish with the help of net, but they don't have net. They are not using any of the technological tools that we are popularly aware about, but they try to cut shred the bark of a specific tree, with which, and they cut it into pieces. They throw it in the river, and when the fishes take that or eat those barks or the leaves or the things, they get intoxicated. And then when they are intoxicated, they catch it with the help of simple basket of bamboo. So this is how we can help. There are some questions. As I am in a technological field, students always ask me what literature does to technology. So I always answer, if you try to go into the depth of literature, you will find answers to those unanswered questions which technology is trying to struggle for, right? So these are the technological things probably we are aware, but still they are not aware. Tribals are not aware, but they are living with ecosystem. They are into the ecosystem. They are utilizing the ecosystem. They are not damaging the ecosystem, and they are getting the maximum benefit out of that ecosystem. Yes, we are all popularly aware about this, that is ecofeminism. We all know what is ecofeminism. Many of us, we might be into ecofeminism, but what actually ecofeminism is doing? Actually, ecofeminism, when so simply, if I want to connect ecofeminism with our Indian concept, then we consider nature as she. For us, nature is mother, right? And therefore, we can say, we can have a common line drawn between, parallel drawn between the eco-feminist discourse. Generally, what is there? It argues that the exploitation of nature and that of the women, both, are intimately linked, with some ecofeminists claiming that I will quote, a parallel in men's thinking between their right to exploit nature on the one hand and the use that they make of women on the other hand. So here they draw the parallel line between what women and what nature, and how they are being exploited. Ecofeminism feminist also argues that the battle of the ecological survival is intrinsically intertwined. How they are intertwined? That means the struggle of women's liberation on the one hand, and the other forms of social justice, they are being drawn parallel. I would like to present you one example. I'm not reading the slides. Let me make it clear, because the slides are there and I will share it with Dr. Ushma ma'am, so that she can, if she wants, she can share it with the students if they are interested. But the slides, I'm not reading the slides. I'm giving you the details as we are running short of time. I'm supposed to attend one meeting again. Sorry for this. But ecofeminism, I would like to just present one example, which I cannot stop myself. If anybody has heard about N.T. Collodini, she had, made an exclusive reading about men's and women's writing. And especially she is focusing on Western landscapes and Western habitats and Western region, where she says like Western landscapes reveal men as responsible for massive exploiting and altering the continent, and women as concerned with, inverted commas, locating a home and a familial human community within a cultivated garden. So here she says she has studied very fantastically like what man has done to the ecology and what women has done to the ecology. Women's role is constrained only to the community, to the family, to the society, and she is busy in cultivating her own garden, whereas men has spoiled it. Again, I will say it is a very eco-feminist approach. This is just an approach which I wanted to share with you. So I had done it. So this is how we are moving further with the slide, that is post-colonialism, how it is and how we can differ. Post-colonialism is not equal to eco-criticism, but how eco-criticism and post-colonialism are interlinked. See, post-colonialism studies, if I want to praise this example, these studies were followed by two panoramic critical manifesto. Number one is by Graham Huggins' Greening, and Greening Post-Colonialism. It is 2005 publication, and Robo Nixon's Environmentalism and Post-Colonialism in 2005. What both of them are trying to focus. See, discussing creative work by the Indian writer Arundhati Roy, South African writer J.M. Coetzee, and Canadian Barbara Huggins' article argue that post-colonial criticism rectifies the relative culture blindedness to which eco-criticism often falls prey. This is what is the discrimination which again is wanted to draw between. Post-colonialism, yeah.
Our director sir has come to congratulate us and thank us. So in between we can contact him and we can join again for post-colonialism.
Sure. Please.
Otherwise you can, how much slides are left, ma'am?
Probably 7 more to go.
Then we can, then you can complete, ma'am. Okay, you can go for conclusion. But not that much fast, but you can take your time and conclude.
Okay, no issues. Yeah, Nixon essay, he tries to draw a line, like he says, dialogue with post-colonialism by relaxing tensions between post-colonial preoccupation with displacement. Here the theory of displacement and eco-criticism preoccupation with an ethics of the place. So for post-colonialism, displacement becomes the theme, whereas for eco-criticism, ethics of the place. That means, as I say, think globally. So you are supposed to think globally and you are supposed to draw and think about the things. Recent eco-criticism here scrutinizes more intensively the relationship between imperialism and eco-critical distress within the literatures, not only of Europe and Anglo North America, but India also. To draw one example, just to give you one example, eco-critical studies focusing on especially Caribbean literature, I'm talking about Caribbean literature only, have also analyzed creative depictions of complicated relationship among ecological devastation and post-colonial trauma, myths of ethnic and natural origin, and cultural creolization. Such scholarship, which we can say is visible also in Indian English literature writing, and there are few very good renowned critics, and probably it is very popular in India. If I want to say, Mukherjee, Upamanyu Pablo Mukherjee, Post-Colonial Environments, 2010 publication, where Mukherjee focuses on contemporary Indian English writing that discusses the subcontinent's environmental crisis, including writings by Arundhati Roy, Amitav Ghosh, Indra Sinha, and Ruchir Joshi, where Amitav Ghosh's Hungry Tide is in detail. Mukherjee has tried to discuss the novel at length. So those who are interested may definitely refer to Mukherjee, and you can get the things out. The very new opening is indigeneity and eco-criticism. What is indigeneity? That means the tribal literature, the tribal things, wherein only and only all the versions are orally narrated. It is just transmission of knowledge orally through generation to generation. They like to tell stories, and then they try to go through underlining mythographies, and through these studies we can have in-depth studies of ecology if anybody is interested. Because critics have attracted towards the indigenous place-based stories and myths, both for their own sake and for their potential adaptability as models for contemporary artists and life practices. What I personally feel when somebody is learning tribal literature or somebody is going after indigenous studies, one should be focusing on the challenges of their sustainability or restoring eco-cultural identity, notwithstanding the trauma of cultural change, displacement, and discrimination that we are facing in day in, day out during our urbanized culture. So what is to be focused when we are going through the study of indigeneity is we need to figure out what are the sustainable way out for them, as well as how the sciences or the indigenous practices that they follow can be utilized by us in our modern society. So this is how we can develop our interest. For the younger generation, why you need to get attracted towards this storytelling and art? It's always mesmerizing. Just be seated, try to go through one indigenous story being narrated by Bhagatji or Hoda, and try to understand what they are trying to say. Whenever they are narrating their myth, whenever they are telling their story, they be it Mahabharata, be it their Ramdev, be it their own clan story, they are trying to show us their nature, their culture, their ecosystem, their lifestyle, their caste. Everything comes in picture, which enables you to study them in detail. There are various things, various examples which I would like to throw, but because of the things that we are moving ahead, I mean, shortage of time is there, I would not like to focus much, but those who are definitely interested can go through the slides. There are further references which I have given into my slides. Go through it, study it. It is really mesmerizing. If just by a leisure reading also you can and you will enjoy, and you will try to learn what ecosystem is doing in our culture and how it is making us sustainable. Ecotourism is now more focusing on animal studies. If not, then we should, because there are many upcoming writers, like Tamil stories are coming, like Urdu stories are being translated into English. There are Gujarati stories being translated into English, where animal studies and animal life have been in focus. And we all know Panchatantra, we all know Aesop's fable, we all know many other cartoon stories where animals were coming into life and they were the heroes and they were dedicated. So how ecology and what they are trying to show us, many other stories have come upon. I would like to give an example, Haraway. Haraway, in her seminal works, the title is The Companion Species Manifesto and When Species Meet. That is the title of her work. And she says, has argued that recognition of how humans are co-constituted by animals with whom they live, mostly pet animals. See, we have a trend of keeping a pet, right? So pet animals, uske sath kaise hum kya karte hain? How do we have a co-constitution with them? So with pet, in our discussion, opens up a post-humanist perspective on humans as one species among others, rather than one with special privileges. So here, what is the difference? Till date, humans were projected as a privileged species. But when you go with the animal studies and ecosystem or eco-criticism, then what is the difference? We are not having any special privileges, but we are among the species, because when mouse is speaking, when horse is speaking, what do we have? They are thinking, what do we have in different? That is why. But Haraway has also been attacked by many of the other critics for focusing on pet dogs rather than on factory farming or anything else. And this issue, especially the difference of opinion between Haraway and the other critics, have given rise to many debate, like interrelation between animal domestication, dietary habits, ecosystematic change that we are pursuing through writers, journalists, activists, etc. So this is how we have to go for. As one of the eco-feminist critic has pointed out, environmental writing is not exempt from such conceptualization, that is, from most white male writers. See, understand, ecofeminism yahan pe picture mein again aa raha hai when we come with animal studies. So there is one white writer, he says, for most white writers, white male writers, dark-skinned people and women are inevitably close to animals, associated with matter, body, and ultimately the degradation of undifferentiated merging with nature. So ecofeminism, when again merged with animal studies and the analysis that has been done, many white male writers, this is not from my side, it has been referred from an article, so it's not my personal views, not to debate on it, but just to give you one idea that this is what we are doing and how we are going ahead. We must have seen, rather, I would like to give you one recent example. where poetic and storytelling tradition, right? Poetry and storytelling tradition around the world had tended to focus not so much on animals' differences as on their similarity to humans. Many poetry we can see there is a similarity drawn between human life and animal life. Animals Farm is one of the example. You can go and check it out. So differences as on their similarity to humans by featuring animals and sometimes plants that possess the gift of language. Even plants are given the gift of language. To give you the best example, probably a cartoon series, recent work that is animated film series by Disney. The title is Bambi, and Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke. The best version where you can see that the most influential art form in shaping public perception of nature and animals in 20th century. These are the two best examples. And on nature documentaries with their sometimes anthropomorphizing tendencies has highlighted the ambivalent role of anthropomorphic animals. These animals are portrayed not only as distortions of a genuinely environmental perception, but also as powerful attractors to the realm of non-human. Anybody who see this Bambi series, anybody who go for this Princess Mononoke series will be attracted, be it of any age, you will be attracted and you will not leave without going through in detail. That is yet to be done. What all things we can do more in eco-criticism is there. We can see nowadays the digital humanities, the digital modes are coming in picture. So we can go further with eco-criticism and digitalization on the modes, and we can have a cultural study and literary study in that. Eco-criticism should play an important role not only in analyzing existing environmental literature, but also in imagining the outlines of different and more positive and future-oriented ways of thinking and writing for environmentalism, basically. So we cannot go on with the constraint of what the other has given or what the things are there, but we can definitely focus more. Going ahead with the digitalization, if I say, given eco-critics an interest in place, space, and relationship between local, regional, national, and global modes of thought and activism, new modeling and visualization technique for complex ecological as well as cultural process stand to play a significant role in the future development of this field. So if we want to go ahead, we can definitely go with digitalization and eco-criticism hand in hand, and then we can try a lot. And even a great deal of eco-critical work has shown to predominance of how environmentalist thought and literature and the optimistic way out towards literature can lead us further. As I have pointed in my said in my initial stand, that Erin James eco-narratology, which is definitely an untouched area, or rather it is still to be explored a lot, wherein she says very deeply that the story worlds that readers stimulate and transport themselves. Like when I'm reading a story and I will be transported to the world of the creator. But when I'm doing this, definitely my habitat, my thinking will get affected because of my own upbringing or my own world. So there is, when reading narratives, the correlations between such textual imaginative worlds and the physical extra-textual world and the potential of the reading process to foster awareness. This will give us the awareness and understanding of different environmental imagination and experiences. So yes, these are the references. Furthermore, references are there. I will definitely circulate. I would like to thank you, and I would like to thank Nanda Kuvarba Mahila Arts College, who has given me this opportunity to share my views. And I will end here. I will say, think green and go green. Thank you all. Though in a hurry, I try to explain what I can, but because of the shortage of time, I'm sorry if I'm not able to correlate the things. Please.
Of course you did, madam. Even you and Lopamudra madam both have reminded me Amitav Ghosh and Amish Tripathi and tribal literature and all the scene and scenarios of Himalayan mountain range. Though it is lockdown, but I feel that I have gone over there and come back again over
nice.
here on this techno field. Thank you very much, Dr. Lopamudra madam also, Dr. Rajneesh sir also, Dr. dear Meera madam also. Thank you very much. And right now no more sessions are there, so I am thanking all the other professors who have attached with us in the morning sessions. Dr. Smruti madam, Dr. Shweta Sinha ma'am, and Dr. Marin Simi ma'am, and Dr. Jagdish Joshi sir also. He had inaugurated the function, and the function has reached at its highest level. It has become the excellent success. All of you had given the very fine, deep insight to do hundreds of researches more, because there are many fields which were unearthed today and they were explored, and you have shown the ways to do the researches. Now there are many more other researches that can be done on these particular presentations which you have presented. The excellent preparations and excellent presentations are done. Thank you very much, the whole team. And I thank the Nankorba Mahila College also. Nankorba Mahila College, Dr. Shri Ravindra sir also, Shri Bharat sir also. They have provided me the stage to do this national level symposium. I thank you. I thank the BTA team, Shri Nidhi madam. She has done a lot more for the whole day. She has been doing everything and connecting the people and contacting others and getting the connectivity of the internet, and consistently and constantly she has been standing and helping me throughout the session. Even Ankita madam, Dr. Alpesh Kotar sir, the BCom staff, the whole Nandkorba Mahila College, and almost all the staff of our college, they are directly or indirectly, they are involved in this session. So I thank all on behalf of all the students also. I thank them, and I thank the staff also. Thank you very much. And we can now
Thank you, madam.
end the session.
Thanks
right
to you
now.
also.
Thank you. All the best. Well organized symposium it was. Good.
Thank